Chapter 365. Recalling how Nie Qianyu's eyes were as red as a rabbit's, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help smiling. It was true that the saying, every festive season, one would think twice of one's loved ones. Even though Nie Qianyu usually behaved like an adult, it was only at this moment that Zhang Xiaohua realized that she was just a little girl who had just turned 12. Zhang Xiaohua had given Nie Qianyu the name Little Fish that day. He had wanted to call her Little Rabbit, but there were no similar words in her name. Therefore, he could only take a step back and call her Little Yu as Little Fish. Anyway, it was Nie Qianyu who asked him to call her Little Fish. What did it have to do with Zhang Xiaohua? At first, Nie Qianyu was very happy, thinking that Zhang Xiaohua finally called her by her nickname. However, after listening carefully, she realized that it was not her imagination. Therefore, she clung to Zhang Xiaohua and begged him to change it. However, until now, didn't Zhang Xiaohua still call her Little Fish? Thinking of Nie Qianyu's red eyes, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but think of the occasion when he celebrated Nie Qianyu's birthday. Before the three of them entered Tanha City, they had told each other their ages. At that time, Nie Qianyu said that she was going to celebrate her 12th birthday in a month. At that time, Zhang Xiaohua only felt that this little girl who was not even 12 years old had more experience than him. He could not compare with her at all. However, on that day he suddenly had this idea on a whim. After counting the days, wasn't it the little girl's 12th birthday? That day, when they passed by a rural town, Zhang Xiaohua saw that Nie Qianyu and Little Orange seemed to have forgotten about it. Therefore, he got off the car at the last minute and went to an inn to buy 12 red eggs for Nie Qianyu. Yes, I remember when I was in Guozhuang House. Didn't my mother cook eggs for me on my birthday? Since today is Nie Qianyu's birthday, I naturally have to buy her boiled red eggs. This was also the only thing Zhang Xiaohua bought with her own money along the way. Thinking back to the time when he saw Nie Qianyu's face full of surprise and gratitude, Zhang Xiaohua felt happy in his heart. After all, the price of 12 copper coins was reduced to 11 copper coins by him, and he even won the little girl's laughter. How could he not be happy? That day, Nie Qianyu was tearing up while eating the eggs, as if the eggs were the most delicious thing in the world. Thinking of her teary eyes, Zhang Xiaohua curls her lips secretly. Eating 6 eggs at one time? Isn't she afraid of choking? No wonder her eyes turned red when she cried. It would be a pity if she wasn't called Little Rabbit. As Zhang Xiaohua thought of the interesting things that happened along the way, the silhouette of Pingyang City appeared in her vision. In the snowy twilight, Pingyang City was still as majestic as ever. However, the people had changed. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes couldn't help but turn red. Galloping into the city, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. She found an inn in a more remote area of Pingyang City. It was the new year now and the inn's business wasn't very good. Seeing that there were guests, the innkeeper was very happy. This was the first business of the new year and they had booked an independent courtyard. According to the coachman, they were going to stay for a few more days. Naturally, the innkeeper was very attentive to them and tried his best to flatter the two ladies. However, after a while, seeing that the two ladies were following Zhang Xiaohua's lead, he realized that he had misjudged them. He immediately changed his attitude and walked towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua didn't have the patience for this. She drove the carriage to the courtyard and left the odd beasts and the black horse in the care of the innkeeper. She unloaded the items from the carriage and put them in a room. She didn't need the innkeeper to find help. Seeing this, the innkeeper naturally knew what to do. He instructed the shop assistants to do what they were supposed to do and quickly left, so as not to disturb the three of them in the courtyard. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua had unloaded the items from the carriage, unlike in the past where she would leave everything in the carriage for the night in order to make it easier for them to travel in the morning, Nie Qianyu and Xiao Juzi's hearts skipped a beat. Could it be that Pingyang City is the place where he is going to do his business? Indeed, after Nie Qianyu and Xiao Juzi had finished packing and were waiting for their meal, Zhang Xiaohua pushed the door open and entered. She smiled and said, "It's the 5th day of the Lunar New Year now. I have already asked the inn to make dumplings for you. You must eat your fill later." Nie Qianyu stood up and asked, "Big Brother Ren, from what you said, it seems that you don't intend to eat with us later?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "I still have something to do and will go out for a while. I may be back late tonight. You guys can eat by yourselves." "Back tonight? Big Brother Ren, are you going to do something?" Nie Qianyu asked anxiously. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and didn't answer. Nie Qianyu blinked and said, "Big brother Ren, be careful." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and turned to leave the room. She walked into the snowy night in a few steps. Two pairs of concerned eyes followed him from inside the house until his figure disappeared into the darkness. Nie Qianyu turned around and asked, "Xiao Juzi, do you think Big Brother Ren is going to do something tonight?" Xiao Juzi smiled and said, "Miss, how would I know? But seeing that he didn't answer you, it seems to be the case. But from what he said, he will be back tonight. Does that mean that we can continue our journey to Carefree City tomorrow? But since we can leave tomorrow, why should we unload the things in the carriage?" Xiao Juzi smiled bitterly and said, "We don't have to worry about these things. Miss, you just focus on eating dumplings. I heard that the dumplings in the north are different from those in Carefree City. You have to try more dumplings later." Nie Qianyu looked disappointed and murmured, "No matter how delicious it is, can it be better than red eggs?" If Zhang Xiaohua was here, she would definitely refute her. Of course, braised pork is better than red eggs. Unfortunately, he was on the way to Misty Mountain Villa and didn't know about Nie Qianyu's girlish feelings. Yes, Zhang Xiaohua was walking to Misty Mountain Villa. The sky had already darkened, and the snow continued to fall endlessly. It had already covered the sun, and now it was no different from the night. There were few people on the streets, and they were all wearing new clothes and hiding in their houses to enjoy the rare New Year's atmosphere. Zhang Xiaohua did not intend to use the levitation technique or the earth escape technique, because his thoughts were now very chaotic. He was somewhat anxious to see the Misty Mountain Villa and the Huanxi Mountain Villa, but he was also somewhat afraid. This kind of contradictory mood could only be slowly calmed down by walking in the empty streets and alleys, and walking in the dark night. Zhang Xiaohua walked out of Pingyang City alone in the snow. The sky was also dark and there weren't many people in the city. Even if there were people hurriedly passing by in the snow, they wouldn't pay too much attention to him. Otherwise, wouldn't it be shocking if he didn't have an umbrella in his hand and snow on his body? Walking on the even more spacious road outside the city, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly stopped. He seemed to have figured something out. He looked up at the dark night sky and the snowflakes that floated in from time to time. He turned back to look at the footprints he had left on the snow. They had already been covered by the rapidly falling snowflakes. He then looked at the snow-white road in front of him that didn't have any traces. Zhang Xiaohua's lips curled into a smile. "I've walked on the road behind me and left traces, but they won't last long. What kind of thing in this world can last long? It's just a matter of time. I haven't walked on the road ahead. It's up to me to decide what kind of traces I want to leave. They can be the same as the footprints behind me, or..." At the thought of this, Zhang Xiaohua floated up and used the levitation technique. He leaped into the air and flew forward like a deity. "I can also be different from before and not leave any traces on the road. Without destruction, there can be no construction. This must be the case. The Misty School has long been on the decline in the pugilistic world. It's a miracle that it has survived for so many years. In the pugilistic world, survival of the fittest is the most realistic thing. It's normal that the three sects would join forces to destroy it. Moreover, the Dalan Temple and the incense cult actually allowed Hu Yuni to escape from Ethereal Peak with the descendants of the Misty School. This is an anomaly. Could it be that they let them go because they are all descendants of the Immortal Tao? Or is there something else going on? The Misty School is now as broken as it can be. However, the foundation of Misty Heights is still there. It's just that it's been occupied by the Righteous Alliance. The two leaders of the Righteous Alliance have been crippled. I don't know what's going on now. They probably won't have any extra thoughts on Misty Heights. It's not impossible for the Misty School to rise again. If there is such a day, I believe the ethereal sect will prosper once again. However, sect leader O has committed suicide. The Misty School has lost its backbone. Only 3 of the 6 Misty Tigers are left. 2 of them have been crippled. Hu Yuni is also seriously injured and his martial arts have been greatly reduced. The eldest disciple of the sect leader, Zhang Chengyue, has also committed suicide. Sigh, it's like a plate of loose sand now. Forget it. After I send little fishy home, I'll go to the incense cult and find second brother first. I'm also not a disciple of the Misty School. Why should I worry about this for no reason? Although Misty Heights was quite a distance away from Pingyang City, Zhang Xiaohua quickly arrived in front of the archway of Misty Heights with her levitation technique. Zhang Xiaohua stood in front of the straight road and couldn't help but think of the scene when she first came here. Sigh, things remain the same, but people have changed. In the darkness, the smooth road was covered with white snow and reflected white light. Zhang Xiaohua sighed and walked up. It was as if she wanted to relive the feelings of that day. Zhang Xiaohua slowly walked towards the archway of Misty Heights and released her divine sense. Perhaps it was because it was the new year or because it had been many years since the Misty School was destroyed. The Righteous Alliance's protection had already been lax. Tonight, there weren't any disciples of the Righteous Alliance guarding the archway. When Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense saw the two ancient words, Misty, on the archway, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Chapter 366. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense felt that the word, Misty, on the archway of the Misty Mountain Villa was abnormal. He immediately floated towards the archway without touching the ground. When he reached the bottom of the archway, he stood with his hands behind his back and closed his eyes. He released his divine sense and carefully observed the archway that had been standing for 10,000 years. The fluttering snowflakes were still unable to touch his body. After a long while, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly opened his eyes and a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. After thinking for a while, he floated to the top of the tall decorated archway and looked around in the deep night sky. After which, he used his qinggong and headed east. After walking for a long time, he arrived at a deserted area. Using his divine sense, he walked into an abandoned courtyard. He searched as he walked until he reached a wall. Only then did he stop and look up and down. After thinking for a while, his body rose again and continued to follow the Misty Mountain Villa and head to another place. Just like this, Zhang Xiaohua walked around the outer area of the huge Misty Mountain Villa in a short period of time. He would stop at a dilapidated rubbish dump, a new garden, and a half-old house. Every time he arrived at a place, Zhang Xiaohua would stop for a moment and release his divine sense to observe carefully. The confusion in his eyes gradually lessened. When he returned to the front of the decorated archway, the corners of his mouth had already revealed a trace of a slight smile. The Misty School is indeed a big sect that has been passed down for 10,000 years. This archway is actually the eye of the 6 Directions Annihilation Formation. It's a pity that for some reason, the other 5 eyes of the formation have been destroyed and this protective formation did not have any effect. Otherwise, even if the Aroma sect, the Dalan Temple and the Alliance of Righteous Sects joined forces, they would not be able to break in. This so-called 6 Directions Annihilation Formation is a top-killing formation in the records of Fire Dragon Immortal. It requires 6 people of the Immortal Dao to use different methods to attack the 6 eyes of the formation at the same time for it to be effective. The Qi of Heaven and Earth is scarce. Where can we find 6 people of the Immortal Dao? This formation should be indestructible. Oh, I forgot. Since the Qi of Heaven and Earth is scarce, where does the Qi of Heaven and Earth come from? If you have some primeval stones, that's fine, but does this Misty School not have enough primeval stones? However, look at the 5 abandoned array cores just now. They are all traces of man-made destruction. Some of them have been forcibly demolished to build houses and gardens. Some of them have even been turned into garbage dumps. Alas, man-made disasters are worse than natural disasters. This is the consequence of destroying the environment, forcibly demolishing and building, and illegal construction. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the Misty Mountain Villa with countless lights in front of him. This time, he had come here to explore and see what was going on. Now that he had been delayed in front of the decorated archway, he had wasted too much time. Seeing that it was getting late, Zhang Xiaohua prepared to go back. However, when his eyes turned to the Huanxi Mountain Villa next to him, he had an idea. He jumped down from the decorated archway and landed on the ground. After he made a gesture with his hands, his figure suddenly disappeared. When he appeared again, he was already in front of the herb field of the Huanxi Mountain Villa. Zhang Xiaohua jumped out of the ground and looked around. He could not help but smile bitterly. He wanted to go to the small courtyard where he lived, but he ran to the herb field. At this time, the herb field had long been deserted, and the flat land was covered with thick snow. Thinking of this place where he had struggled in the past, Zhang Xiaohua had an idea. He did not know whether O Yen had found the reason why the herbs did not germinate. Thinking of the problem of the herbs not germinating, Xianxia now had an incomplete idea. The growth of the herbs needed to absorb a certain amount of qi of heaven and earth. Those herbs that did not germinate must need more qi of heaven and earth. The lack of qi of heaven and earth in the herb field naturally could not provide enough qi of heaven and earth for the herbs to germinate. Of course, the herbs would not germinate. However, the spring water of the Guozhuang house was rich in qi of heaven and earth. If he could use the spring water of the Guozhuang house to water these herbs, there might be some effect. Of course, the qi of heaven and earth in the spring water from the Guozhuang house had long disappeared between heaven and earth. But where did the qi of heaven and earth in the spring water come from? Wasn't it provided by the small pieces of primordial stones at the bottom of the well? Speaking of primordial stones, how much qi of heaven and earth did the primordial stone in Zhang Xiaohua's purse provide? Therefore, in Zhang Xiaohua's mind, if he could put a piece of primordial stone in the water and use the water to water the herbs that did not germinate, it should be possible. However, this idea was just an idea now, and there would be no day for it to be put into practice. Didn't the Decent Alliance say that they would not interfere with everything in the Huanqi villa? Why is the herb field deserted? Zhang Xiaohua was a little depressed. Immediately, he spread out his divine awareness and carefully observed. Of course, he did not want to look at the misty villa. The Huanqi villa was his old place and his first step in Jianghu. How could he not have deep feelings for it? Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua's mouth showed a smile again. His body did not move, but suddenly, like a gust of wind, he flew to his own small courtyard. In Zhang Xiaohua's earliest hut, the barefoot brother Ma was still sitting on his messy kong, scratching his feet and drinking a little wine. From time to time, he would pick up a few peanuts from the plate on the kong and put them into his mouth. On the kong opposite him, the honest Lu Erhuan was sitting in a corner of the kong. Beside him were several young men in green clothes and hats. They were all staring at Ma Jing without blinking, as if they were listening to something. When Zhang Xiaohua passed by the hut in the small courtyard, she heard a few words floating from inside. You don't know. That year, Brother Shi and I were working in the field, helping our manor lord O to plant rare medicinal herbs. Then we saw several big monks and several men from Jianghu descending from the sky. I was very shocked, but I couldn't ruin the prestige of our Huanxi mountain village. So I stepped out from the crowd and asked, "Who are you?" Zhang Xiaohua looked at the hut in the small courtyard and said, "You don't know. That year, Brother Shi and I were working in the field, helping our manor lord O plant rare medicinal herbs. Do you know how the monk answered?" The several people opposite him shook their heads and said in unison, "We don't know." Ma Jing let go of his feet, put the peanuts into his mouth and said, the monk said, "Brother, we are from the Huanqi villa. We are monks from the Dalin temple. We were ordered to come to Huanqi villa to check. Brother, please do us a favor." At this time a boy asked, "Brother Ma, that's not right. The monk called us benefactors. Why did he call us brother? You are not a monk." Ma Jing was a little disapproving and said, "Maybe I remembered wrongly. You think that since they were so polite, I naturally couldn't be rude, so I said, 'Brother Ma, that's not right. I heard from Brother Shi that those people were very fierce at that time. When they came to our Huanqi villa, they searched everywhere and broke a lot of things. They also beat a lot of people. It is said that they were looking for some martial arts secret book?' Another person also said, 'Yes, it's the house I live in. It's said that it's been ransacked. I just don't know whether they found the martial arts secret book or not.'" Ma Jing impatiently put his hand in front of his nose and said, "Do you still want to hear it? If you don't want to hear it, I will go to sleep." Yes, of course we want to hear it. Didn't we all come to the villa later? We didn't have time to participate in the glorious history of the villa. We still have to rely on Brother Ma to tell us more about your glorious deeds. Humph. Now you know how to respect the old and love the young? Let me tell you, that martial arts secret book definitely wasn't found. Hey, Brother Ma, we know. Brother Shi said that he didn't know. Won't it be clear if you use your brain to think? If they found the martial arts secret book at that time, would they still take our villa master O to preach the incense cult? The servant said at once, "Yes, Brother Ma is right. We have been in the villa for more than 2 years, but we have never seen the villa master. I heard that our villa master is a great beauty? Brother Ma, you must have seen the villa master." Ma Jing was speechless. What kind of servants are these? They actually dare to talk about the villa master behind her back. However, Villa Master O is indeed a great beauty. Zhang Xiaohua stood on the roof and listened to the group of servants talking nonsense. She couldn't help but secretly laugh. No, now that she thought about it, O Yan was indeed very beautiful. At that time, she was young and didn't understand. She only felt that O Yan was as kind as a sister-in-law. The servants nowadays are really good. Each generation is better than the previous. Zhang Xiaohua thought so. Then, she used her divine sense to scan the inner courtyard and was ready to leave. However, she suddenly frowned as if she saw something. Her figure flew into the inner courtyard again. When she stopped again, it was the small courtyard where she was stopped when she first entered the inner courtyard. The small courtyard was silent. There was only a dim light coming from a small house. Zhang Xiaohua stood in the middle of the courtyard and thought for a moment. She walked to the door and reached out to knock on the door. A clear voice sounded from inside. Who is it? Wasn't it Qiuju? Zhang Xiaohua said in a low voice. Sister Qiuju, it's me. I'm Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua? Qiuju was obviously stunned. Then, as if she remembered something, she cried out in surprise. Zhang Xiaohua, it's you. Wait a moment, you. Then she heard the sound of hurried footsteps from inside. The door of the small house opened with a chi-la sound, revealing a face full of surprise. Qiuju opened the door. Although she was fully prepared, she was still stunned for a moment. The tall young man in front of her had the same face as the young man in her memory. It was just that the shape of his face was a little elongated, but he had grown a lot. However, thinking about it, it had already been 4 or 5 years. Why hadn't this young man's face changed? She asked hesitantly. Are you really Zhang Xiaohua? Zhang Xiaohua touched her face and smiled. Why, Sister Qiuju, I heard that my face didn't change much. Don't tell me you can't recognize me? No, it's just, at this moment, Zhang Xiaohua said. Sister Qiuju, I even hung clothes for you in the past. Don't you remember? Chapter 367. How could Qiuju not know that the young man in front of her was Zhang Xiaohua from back then? She covered her mouth and laughed. She moved aside and said, Xiaohua, come in quickly. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and entered Qiuju's room. The layout of the room in the inner courtyard was obviously different from the small room Zhang Xiaohua used to live in. If the room was a brick bed to sleep on, Qiuju would not have let Zhang Xiaohua in so late at night. This was obviously a small room similar to a living room. A small table was placed in the middle and chairs were placed around it. Zhang Xiaohua entered the room and found a chair to sit on. Qiuju picked up the teapot from the side and poured a cup of hot tea. She smiled and said, Xiaohua, drink a cup of hot tea to warm your body. Zhang Xiaohua reached out to take the cup. He took a sip and was about to put it down when Qiuju said, Don't put it down. Just hold it like this. It can warm your hands. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He smiled and said, Sister Qiuju is indeed attentive. Although he was not afraid of cold or heat, he still held the cup with both hands. He was about to speak when Qiuju said, Xiaohua, where have you been these years? I remember 5 years ago, I heard from Sister Qiu Tong that you went missing and were killed by a group of bandits. Hee, I'm not talking about you. Xiaohua, you learned a lot of martial arts from Captain He, but you couldn't even beat a group of bandits. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua had returned safely without missing an arm or leg, Qiuju naturally mocked him without holding back. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Sister Qiuju is wrong. There were hundreds and thousands of bandits. I was just one person. How could I beat them? Unless I had 3 heads and 6 arms. Qiuju said, with your small body back then, you wouldn't be able to beat them even if you had 9 heads and 36 arms, let alone 3 heads and 6 arms. At this point, she covered her mouth and laughed. Then she said, All right, tell sister what happened at that time. Gang leader O sent a lot of people to look for you, but there was no news of you. Miss and Sister Qiu Tong thought that you couldn't come back, so they were sad for a long time. Alas, if they could see you coming back to Huanqi Villa today, they would be very happy. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, Actually, there's not much to say about my story. At that time, I encountered bandits who were doing bad things and kidnapped a girl. I thought that I could be considered to have learned martial arts, So I went with second brother to the bandits' stronghold to save her. We did manage to save her, but we were discovered by the Tenryu sect and were captured. Tenryu sect? Choju was puzzled. What sect is that? I don't think I've heard of it before. Zhang Xiaohua said, there are countless sects in Jianghu. It's normal that Sister Choju hasn't heard of them. Then what? The Tenryu sect actually captured you for 5 years? You're just a child. They're too inhumane. Zhang Xiaohua giggled and said, Sister Choju, I'm not that young. Choju smiled and didn't say anything. Zhang Xiaohua continued, actually, not long after they captured me, I found a chance to escape. However, I didn't escape on land, but on the vast sea. I drifted to an island alone and didn't return to land until recently. Ah! Choju widened her eyes in surprise and asked incredulously, Xiaohua, you actually went to sea and spent 5 years alone on a deserted island? Yes, Sister Choju. Actually, it's nothing. I wasn't used to it at first, but I got used to it after a while. Really? Alas, poor child. Choju's motherly love burst forth in an instant. She felt that Zhang Xiaohua's experience was unfair. She said, fortunately, you're finally back. Well, that's good. Stay in Huanqi Villa from now on and don't go anywhere else. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua sighed and said, then what about the situation of Miss O and Sister Qiu Tong, and the current situation of our Huanqi Villa? Choju's face showed a worried expression again and said, our Huanqi Villa and Piaomiao Villa have always been one, and we are related to each other. The Misty School was destroyed by the incense cult, the Dalan Temple, and the Righteous Alliance. Half of the disciples died on the spot. Although Elder Hu escaped, the rest of the disciples were mediocre in martial arts, and some of them were destroyed. They were all taken back by the incense cult. Although our Huanqi Villa was protected by Nun Jingyi of the incense cult, and the other 2 factions had no choice but to yield, Miss was taken away by them. Sister Qiu Tong couldn't bear to part with Miss, so she went with them. The other sisters and I also wanted to go, but Miss didn't allow it, so we stayed. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua asked, Sister Choju, do you know where the incense cult is? This. Choju shook her head and said, I don't know about this. That day, there were many of them and they set off together. When I bid farewell to Miss, I didn't hear her mention it. I reckon that Miss herself might not know about it. However, their carriage was heading towards the south. How is the villa now? Is it the same as before? Zhang Xiaohua asked. Choju still smiled bitterly and said, Huanqi Villa has left the Misty School. How can it be the same as before? Although the 3 factions have an agreement that they can't interfere with Huanqi Villa, the Righteous Alliance is right next to Huanqi Villa and has occupied Piaomiao Villa. Every move of our villa is under the surveillance of the Righteous Alliance. According to our guards, a few years ago, the villa was surrounded by their disciples, and they were monitoring both openly and secretly. It's only this year that they relaxed their vigilance. However, when you came back today, you must have been interrogated at the entrance of the villa. Even now, it's the new year, they still left people to not let our villa have a peaceful time. Is that so? What about inside the villa? Zhang Xiaohua asked again. There's no change in the villa. Some people saw that Huanqi Villa has no future and quietly ran away. These people are really heartless. Mistreated them so well in the past, but they abandoned their conscience and ran away. Xiaohua, you don't know, many of them have sold themselves to the villa. However, under the intervention of the Righteous Alliance, nothing is settled. Zhang Xiaohua smiled faintly and didn't say anything. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua, Choju smiled and said, you still have a good conscience. Knowing that the villa is in such a state, you still came back. Miss and elder sister Qiu Tong treated you well in the past. However, the medicinal field in our villa has long been deserted. They are preparing to plant crops. Xiaohua, you came from a farming family, so you must be very proficient in this aspect. Let me talk to Qiuxiang tomorrow. Why don't you be Tian Zhongxi's assistant? Zhang Xiaohua smiled faintly and said, that's right, elder sister Qiuju, where did Elder Yu go? Oh, Elder Yu. He naturally followed Miss to the incense cult. Although he is the steward of the villa, he still has to protect Mississippi. Elder sister Qiu Tong can only serve Mississippi. If it's protection, it can only be done by Elder Yu. Oh, I see. Zhang Xiaohua touched her nose with her finger. There are a lot of changes in the villa. However, as long as you work hard like before, your livelihood will definitely not be a problem. Xiaohua, Miss and Qiu Tong are not here. If you have any problems, feel free to tell elder sister. Although elder sister is not Qiu Xiang, I can still speak for you. I definitely won't let you suffer. Hee. Then I'll thank elder sister Qiu first. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, however, I didn't come back to the villa this time. I haven't gone home to see my parents and, Qiu smiled and said, you came to the villa before going home. Xiaohua, Miss really has good taste. It doesn't matter. I'll ask Tian Chongxi to give you a month's leave. Go back and reunite with your parents. It won't be too late to go back to the villa. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, elder sister Qiu, can you let me finish my words? Qiu smiled and said, I haven't seen you for many years. I'm happy to see the old people in the villa. All right, you say it. I won't interrupt. Zhang Xiaohua said, elder sister Qiu, after I go home, I don't plan to go back to the villa. What? Qiu's expression changed a little. Then she smiled bitterly and said, that's right. The villa is like this now. It's normal that you don't come back. It doesn't matter. Xiaohua, if you have time, just come back and see your old friends in the villa. Zhang Xiaohua said helplessly, elder sister, didn't you say that you won't interrupt? Only then did Qiu stop interrupting. She didn't answer. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I plan to go home to see my parents, and then go to find Miss and elder sister Qiu Tong. Qiu couldn't help but interrupt again. She said in surprise, You really want to find them? Yes. Zhang Xiaohua said, I haven't seen them for so many years. I don't know if they are still alive in the world. Chapter 368. Miss really didn't misjudge you. Miss really didn't misjudge you. Qiu couldn't help but repeat this sentence, which made Zhang Xiaohua blush a little. However, his heart was calm. Nonsense. I'm going to save second brother. Of course, I can also save O Yan and Qiu Tong. Qiu is not wrong. Hee. But, Qiu immediately realized something and said, but, the people of Chuanxiang cult are very good at martial arts. How can you see, miss? Well, if you say that you are a servant of Huanxi Manor, maybe they will let you in. But, how can you go to Chuanxiang cult? Do you know where Chuanxiang cult is? Didn't you just ask me this question? Qiu said a few but, and asked a few more questions, which hit the nail on the head. Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, when I came back this time, I happened to meet a disciple of the Misty School called Chu Yunfei. He said that when he went back, he would ask Elder Hu. If he knew the address of Chuanxiang cult, he would find a way to tell me. Then I would know how to get there. Oh, is that so? Qiu nodded and said, I really envy you, Xiaohua. If I were a man, I would also be like you and go see Mississippi, Zhang Xiaohua said. If Qiu's sister was a man, Miss wouldn't dare to let you see her. Ha. Qiu suddenly realized and covered her mouth to laugh. She had never been so happy in the past few years. Then, Qiu asked, Xiaohua, where do you live? I remember that your little house has been occupied by the new servant. I don't know where your things are. Zhang Xiaohua was still holding the teacup that was gradually losing its heat. She said, it's like this, Qiu sister. I'm not going back to the manor this time, so I didn't inform brother Shi. Also, I have to go back later. And Qiu frowned and said, then you are. Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. Didn't Qiu sister just say that Captain He and I? Oh right, where is Captain He? How is he? Zhang Xiaohua suddenly realized that she hadn't asked about this initiator yet. Perhaps he had already subconsciously regarded He Tianshu as a martyr in the Misty School. Well, Qiu also shook her head and said, Captain He was not in Huanxi Villa at that time. There were many casualties in the Misty School, so I don't know where Captain He is. Moreover, when the fragrance cult left, the disciples of the Misty School were divided into many small teams, which were all guarded by the disciples of the fragrance cult. Oh, I see. Zhang Xiaohua sighed and said, I hope Captain He is fine. Then she explained, didn't I learn martial arts from Captain He? Although I'm not as good as the real disciples of the Misty School, I've made some progress. Tonight, I came directly from outside the villa, so I didn't see Brother Shi and the others. Oh, I see. Qiuju understood and advised, it's probably the new year now, and it's snowing heavily tonight. The disciples of the Righteous Alliance have all returned to the villa, so they didn't keep watch outside. Xiaohua, I heard that the disciples of the Righteous Alliance are very powerful. Be careful when you go out later. Also, next time when you enter the villa, don't walk around arrogantly. Just come directly from the main door and say that you're looking for me. You're not a disciple of the Misty School, so they probably won't make things difficult for you. Remember? Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, I know, Sister Qiuju. The next time I come in, I'll use your name. All right, Sister Qiuju, don't tell anyone about me entering the villa this time. If the people of the Righteous Alliance find out, they might. Qiuju smiled and said, I know that. Actually, there might be people from the Righteous Alliance in the villa. Sister, you're not that stupid. Zhang Xiaohua put the teacup on the table and stood up. Since that's the case, I'll go back first. After I see Miss O and Sister Qiu Tong, I'll go back to the villa and tell you about their situation. Qiuju also stood up and said, Okay, Xiaohua, if you see them, say hello to them. Tell them that I miss them a lot in the villa. I'll definitely say hello. Sister Qiuju, I'll go now. Okay, Xiaohua. Why didn't you bring an umbrella or something like that? It's snowing so heavily, don't freeze your body. Wait, I'll find you an umbrella. Seeing that Qiuju was still treating him as the youth from 5 years ago, Zhang Xiaohua felt warm inside. He said, There's no need, Sister Qiuju. When have you ever seen a person walking around with an umbrella in his hand? Qiuju patted her forehead and smiled. I didn't know about that. Haha. Zhang Xiaohua walked to the door and turned back. Sister Qiuju, you don't have to come over. It's windy outside. Don't catch a cold. Qiuju said, Xiaohua hasn't been here for 5 years. I have to send you to the door. As she spoke, she was about to walk over. However, as soon as she took a step, she suddenly shouted, Oh, Xiaohua, wait a moment. When I saw you just now, I was so focused on talking to you that I forgot about something. Alas, but it's just a passing cloud. With that, she turned and walked into the inner room. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. She walked back to the table and waited in confusion. After a while, she saw Qiuju walk out with an envelope and a small paper box in her hands. As she walked, she blew the dust off the envelope and the box. Qiuju came to the table and put the envelope and the box on the table. She smiled and said, These 2 things belong to Qiu Tong. Take them and give them to her when you see her. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She said, Sister Qiuju, since they belong to Sister Qiu Tong, why didn't Sister Qiu Tong take them away that day? Didn't you say something passing cloud just now? Ha! Qiuju heard and smiled. These things were originally given to Qiu Tong by someone else. However, she left in a hurry that day and I forgot about it. If you didn't mention that you were going to see Qiu Tong today, I wouldn't have remembered. All right, I'll tell you in detail. Actually, the matter was very simple. On the day that the Misty School was besieged by the 3 factions, Misty Mountain Villa was facing a formidable enemy. However, Huanxi Mountain Villa was no different from usual. Everyone in the villa was busy with their own matters. Qiuju was in the kitchen preparing something for her young mistress when she saw a rather handsome male disciple of the Misty School come to her with these 2 things. He wanted her to help him pass these 2 things to Qiu Tong. At that time, Qiuju was very puzzled. Qiu Tong was just at the main hall of the inner manor. Couldn't he just go there himself? Why did he have to do it? However, when she saw the male disciple's face that was so red that it was about to drip blood, Qiuju somewhat understood. Moreover, the male disciple also said that this was a birthday present that he had prepared for Qiu Tong. Qiu Tong's birthday was 2 weeks later and the male disciple was about to leave for some matters. He probably wouldn't be back for a while. Hence, he asked Qiuju to pass it to him. He especially said that he wanted Qiuju to pass it to Qiu Tong on her birthday. This way, he could show his sincerity and perhaps give Qiu Tong a surprise. Naturally, Qiuju agreed to this kind of thing immediately. Moreover, she even teased the male disciple at that time. At that time, the male disciple was even more embarrassed. However, Qiuju was so busy that she didn't have time to spare. Hence, She asked the male disciple to put the letter and the box on the shelf in the kitchen first. When she was done, she would take it back to her room. The male disciple thanked her happily and left the box behind. He even specially told her that he would personally pass it to Qiu Tong on her birthday. How could Qiu forget such a thing? Of course, she waved her hand and told him not to worry. However, things were far beyond her expectations. Before she finished her work in the kitchen and was still wondering when Qiu Tong found a lover from the Misty School, the news that the Misty Mountain Villa was attacked by the three factions came. This kind of news was like a thunderbolt. Of course, Qiu forgot some small things. She hurriedly put down her work and ran to find O Yen. At that time, O Yen had already been taken to the Misty Peak by O Peng. Naturally, Qiu couldn't see O Yen. At this time, the Huanxi Mountain Villa, which was part of the Misty School, was also attacked by the three factions. Qiu and the others were forced to return to their rooms and couldn't go anywhere. After a long time, a group of female disciples from the Fragrant Religion, a few monks, and a few disciples from the Righteous Alliance came like wolves and tigers. They searched everyone's rooms and turned everything upside down. No one knew what they were looking for. Qiu didn't dare to ask and just let them do what they wanted. Later, she found out that they were looking for a martial arts secret manual. Qiu found it funny. There were many such things in the Misty Mountain Villa. She had never heard of it in the Huanxi Mountain Villa, let alone in the servants' rooms. What followed was a dark life. The Misty School was destroyed and O Yen was brought back to the Fragrant Religion. Qiu Tong and Elder Yu also went with her. Qiu only saw Qiu Tong once when she was sending them off. How could she remember that a male disciple from the Misty School had secretly sent Qiu Tong a message? 2 weeks after O Yen left, on Qiu Tong's birthday, Qiu suddenly remembered this matter. She quickly ran to the kitchen, which she hadn't seen for a long time, and found the letter and small paper box thrown crookedly in the middle of a pile of seasonings. Looking at the letter and small paper box, Qiu couldn't help but feel sad. Thinking back to that day, that male disciple must have known that he didn't have much of a chance of survival, so he mustered up the courage to confess to Qiu Tong. Qiu Tong, on the other hand, didn't know that there was a male disciple from the Misty School who secretly admired her. No matter whether that male disciple was dead or alive, Qiu Tong had to know of his feelings. Hence, Qiu still took these two things back. She wanted to personally hand them to Qiu Tong when she saw her in the future. However, she waited for 3 years and Qiu Tong never came back. Qiu also forgot about the letter and paper box, and only covered with dust every day. After hearing Qiu's story, Xianxia looked at the letter that didn't seem old and smiled. This is an interesting story. Don't worry, Big Sister Qiu. I will definitely personally hand these two things to Big Sister Qiu Tong. I just don't know the name of that Misty School disciple. Chapter 369. Qiu smiled. How would I know? I did ask him, but how could I tell Qiu Tong his name if I didn't know? That disciple said that Qiu Tong would know as long as she saw the letter. I thought about it and didn't ask any more. Is that so? Xianxia smiled. Hee, won't we know if we see it now? Qiu glared at Xianxia and said, Xiaohua, you're not the child you used to be. Why are you still saying such irrelevant things? Not to mention that this is Sister Qiu Tong's privacy. Without her permission, you can't open it. Also, you know that this might be a suicide note left behind by a disciple who died for the sect. If you don't give it to Sister Qiu Tong and open it yourself, aren't you insulting her spirit in heaven? Xianxia was taken aback. Then he straightened his face and said, Big Sister Qiu is right. Although I was just joking, I didn't think too much about it. Don't worry, I will definitely keep these 2 items well. When I see Big Sister Qiu Tong, I will personally hand them to her. Xianxia carefully took the letter and the small paper box. He put them in his arms and said, Sister Qiu, it's late. I'm leaving. Qiu smiled. Okay, go. Be careful. If possible, come back and tell me about them. Okay, Sister Qiu. Don't lose them. I know. No problem. After saying that, Xianxia waved his hand and walked into the snowflakes floating in the dark night. Qiu walked to the door and watched as Xianxia walked to the door and disappeared. She closed the door and sighed deeply. Not long after, the lights in Qiu's house went out. Everything fell into darkness. Zhang Xiaohua came out of Qiuju's room and went around the wall. First, he used the earth escape technique to walk for a while. Then, he jumped out of the ground and used the levitation technique to go back to the inn. When he came out of the Huanxi mountain villa, he used his divine sense to observe for a while. There was no one watching the entrance of the Huanxi mountain villa. Perhaps, as Qiuju said, it was the New Year's night and the people of the Righteous Alliance must be tired of it. After returning to the small room in the inn, Zhang Xiaohua first carefully took out the letter and paper box from her bosom. Then, she used her divine sense to put them into the space of her money pouch. Only then did she sit down cross-legged and digest the information she had just received. She took out some primeval stones and began to cultivate the Carefree Heart Sutra. The next morning, after practicing the Fist of the North Star outside, Zhang Xiaohua led Huan to the courtyard and returned to her room to comprehend the way of heaven. It was not until the sky was bright and she heard some noises in the room next door that she went out and knocked on Ye Qianyu's door. Xiao Orange, who opened the door, was very happy to see Zhang Xiaohua. She asked, "Child Ren, have you finished your business?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "No, I haven't done it yet. I just went out for a walk yesterday." After letting Zhang Xiaohua into the room, Ye Qianyu asked, "In that case, is Brother Ren going to do it today?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "Yes, Miss Nye is smart. I'm here to say goodbye." "How many days will Brother Ren be gone?" Nye Qianyu asked anxiously. "Well," Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, "it's a little complicated and I'm not sure. I estimate that it will take at least 10 days. So long? Nye Qianyu almost cried out. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "That can't be helped. Miss Nye, it's not a small matter. I underestimated 10 days, maybe 20 days. However, this Pingyang city is already very far away from Tanha City and Worry City. Even if those people who are chasing after you sent a lot of men, they wouldn't have chased you all the way here. Unless they have divine foresight, then there's no other way." Haha, even if they have great foresight, aren't they still fooled by Brother Ren? Nye Qianyu said with a smile. Zhang Xiaohua touched his nose and said, "I'm just that amazing. Don't praise me like that." Bah! Nye Qianyu could not help but spit and blush. "Child Ren, don't worry. I'll take care of Miss Nye here. Nothing will go wrong," Xiao Orange said tactfully. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. This plot seemed very familiar. It was like a phrase commonly used in romance novels. Zhang Xiaohua was embarrassed and said, haha, okay, I'll ride Huan to do something. You guys be careful. If there's nothing important, try not to go out. Oh, I forgot. Nothing will happen even if you go out." "Why is that?" Nye Qianyu was puzzled. "Even if you go out, the bullies in the city won't be able to see you." "Ah, what do you mean?" Xiao Orange was puzzled. Zhang Xiaohua did not explain and said, "Okay, I've already deposited a lot of money in the inn yesterday. It should be enough for a month. Okay, you guys stay here. I'll leave first. Oh yes, how did the dumplings taste yesterday?" With that, he turned and left, as if he was afraid to stay here any longer. Sure enough, before he reached the door, Xiao Orange muttered, "Child Ren is really strange. Yesterday's dumplings did taste good. Why did he only think of asking now?" On the other side, Nye Qianyu seemed to have understood something. Her eyes were wide open and her soft voice was a little high-pitched. She shouted, "Ren Xiaoyao, how dare you say that we're not beautiful?" Zhang Xiaohua heard and did not stop moving. She laughed and said, "Miss Nye, you've wronged me. I didn't say that." Xiao Orange, who was beside her, also asked curiously, "When did Child Ren say that?" Nye Qianyu stomped her feet and said, "Didn't you just say that the bullies in the city look down on us? Didn't you understand?" Ren Xiaoyao. Xiao Orange did not call him Child Ren anymore. What nonsense. A girl's face was the most precious thing. How could she not be angry when you said that? The two of them chased after him to the door. Zhang Xiaohua had already urged the deer to leave a trail of footprints on the thick snow. A burst of laughter could be heard from afar. Surprisingly, the two people who chased after him did not look angry. They were both muttering to themselves, "Look at what Xianxia did. Even a joke is so profound. Even his laughter is so charming. Sigh, if Zhang Xiaohua heard this, wouldn't she fall off the deer directly? The road from Pingyang City to Lu Town was not short. Although the deer could run fast, it was still snowing heavily. It would take at least 3 to 4 days to get back. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua was not in a hurry. The Guozhuang house was just ahead. 4 to 5 years had passed. Why should she be anxious now? Therefore, amidst the snowflakes, on the quiet road, Zhang Xiaohua sat cross-legged on the deer. She closed her eyes and started to cultivate. At this moment, what Zhang Xiaohua wanted to cultivate the most was the Heaven Dao. The feeling of understanding the Heaven Dao was so good that it was hard for Zhang Xiaohua to give up. However, ever since he had reached the 9th level of the Big Dipper magical fist, there would be a bone-honing flow every time he practiced it. He did not have a target for his future cultivation. At that time, he had a sudden inspiration and thought of practicing it from the end to the end again. However, there was no need to recite the reversal of the fist technique. He only needed to read it word by word. Therefore, he did not have the time to think about it carefully. This journey from Pingyang City to Lu Town could be made use of. The 108 forms of the Big Dipper magical fist had left a deep impression in Zhang Xiaohua's mind. The little man who knew how to perform the fist technique had not appeared for a long time. However, it was not difficult to recall it again. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua disassembled all the 108 forms in her mind. She wanted to recombine these forms. She wanted to take out the last form of the form first and then connect the other 107 forms to this form one by one. However, after going through all the forms, there was not a single form that could be connected. Zhang Xiaohua could not help but frown. Could it be that her idea was wrong? Or could it be that she had to find a new fist technique form from the many martial arts fist manuals? Yes, it was possible. Didn't sect leader O say before that the stellar fist had 360 forms? Her Big Dipper magical fist only had 108 forms. There were still many forms missing. However, in this way there was a problem. Since there were still forms that could be extracted from the fist manuals, why couldn't she find them the first time? This was really a problem. Zhang Xiaohua could not help but open her eyes and use her fingers to rub the space between her eyebrows. At this time, there was a sudden rush of ding-dang from behind. A horse carriage caught up from behind. Zhang Xiaohua slightly turned her head. There was a small triangular flag on the carriage with the word, "Fast," written on it. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and patted Huan's head. Huan obediently walked to the side of the road and made way for the horse carriage. As soon as Huan made way, the horse carriage caught up. When it was walking side by side with Zhang Xiaohua, the coachman glanced at Zhang Xiaohua and nodded gently. Zhang Xiaohua also smiled in return. However, at this moment, she heard a cat scream from below the horse carriage. Zhang Xiaohua used her divine sense to scan the area. It was a dirty cat that had been run over by the horse carriage's wheel and was rolling around under the horse carriage. The coachman seemed to have heard it. He frowned and tightened the reins in his hand. He was about to pull the horse carriage, but immediately he released his hand. With a flick of his wrist, he shouted "Jia." The horse carriage continued to roar and did not stop for even a moment. On the snowy ground, the pitiful cat rolled left and right. Finally it stopped moving. Its dirty white belly was facing up. Its 2 hind legs were curled up and twitching. One of its front legs was placed in front of its chest while the other was raised high. It seemed to be trying to grab something. Qidian Chinese website welcomes readers to read the latest, fastest, and hottest series of original works at Qidian. Chapter 370. Seeing the hatred in the cat's eyes, Zhang Xiaohua's heart felt as if it had been struck by a heavy hammer. Looking at the dark red blood flowing from the corner of the cat's mouth and its 4 legs gradually stopping moving, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly felt a wave of sadness in his heart. When the cat had completely stopped moving, Zhang Xiaohua looked around and carefully picked up the pitiful and light little thing from the ground. He walked step by step to the side of the road until he reached the wasteland by the side of the road. After looking around, he put the cat down. Huan also obediently followed him. Zhang Xiaohua took the long sword from Huan's back and quickly dug an extremely deep hole in the wasteland. Zhang Xiaohua picked up the cat and carefully placed it into the deep hole, as if he was afraid of disturbing the cat's beautiful dream. Then, his heart filled with sadness, He sprinkled the soil on the cat bit by bit and murmured something. Only when all the soil was filled into the hole did Zhang Xiaohua stop. He clapped his hands and looked at the dark clouds in the sky. He sighed. Life is so fragile. To be honest, ever since Zhang Xiaohua started practicing qi, he had been decisive in killing. Countless lives had been taken by his hands. Perhaps his killing methods were too nimble and he had never seen more blood. Moreover, the people he killed were all detestable people, so he didn't feel too burdened in his heart. But today, he suddenly saw an innocent cat being run over by a carriage. This ordinary incident that couldn't be more ordinary on a normal day actually aroused his compassion. If it was said to be the backlash of his killing intent from before, it was reasonable. Life, death, life, death. Zhang Xiaohua stood with his hands in his sleeves. He looked up at the sky and murmured these two words over and over again. In an instant, the entire world seemed to be stagnant and the snowflakes also stopped in the air. Zhang Xiaohua's mind once again felt the call of the heavens. At this moment, his consciousness left his body like before and gradually, slowly rose up. This time, Zhang Xiaohua had the previous experience and didn't deliberately or anxiously rise up. Instead, he slowly controlled the speed of his consciousness and spread it out to understand the feeling of the entire world. But soon after, Zhang Xiaohua discovered that his comprehension this time was different from the last time. This time, what he saw through his consciousness was not the various states of the world, but the life and death of the world. As Zhang Xiaohua's consciousness rose and strengthened, from the death of the cat at the beginning, to the birth and death of the surrounding villages, normal deaths, abnormal deaths, countless positive, negative, and positive emotions filled his consciousness. Time and space also seemed to have lost their effect at this time. Zhang Xiaohua also saw the battle between the disciples of the Misty School and the disciples of the three sects in the Misty Mountain Villa. Countless disciples howled in pain. He also saw O Peng commit suicide on the Misty Peak and Yang Ruping face death calmly. Soon after, his consciousness saw even further. He saw himself brandishing his flying sword and wantonly killing more than 10 gang members of an unknown sect. He also saw himself wielding a small sword and killing 3 disciples of the Righteous Alliance. He also saw himself leaping high like a god and killing 5 unknown disciples with a long sword. He even saw himself following Xianxia and killing the masked old man in black. Zhang Xiaohua's consciousness soared even higher, and even more battles in the Jianghu were reflected in his mind. Even more new lives were reflected in his mind. All sorts of emotions revolved around him, tempering him. It was as if the cycle of reincarnation was tempering his consciousness. At the same time, the marks left behind by the heavenly Tao became even clearer and deeper. The sky above Zhang Xiaohua's head was no longer covered in red clouds at some point in time. Instead, it was a night sky dotted with countless resplendent stars. In the distance, the sun that emitted endless light and heat was like a special star. It hung there, no different from the other celestial bodies. The starry sky became clearer, more complete, more vivid, and more lively. Zhang Xiaohua's consciousness was still rising. Although he was deliberately controlling it, it was still rising. The land that he looked down on was still endless. However, in his eyes or in his perception, there was only endless life and death, and the cycle of life and death. Perhaps it was an instant, or perhaps it was a long time. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly had a kind of enlightenment. Life, death, reincarnation, cycle. Pa! Like lightning, it instantly lit up his entire consciousness. He seemed to understand something, but also seemed to not understand something. At this moment, his consciousness accelerated once again, high up. This time, it was different from the previous time. Previously, it was a feeling of being at a loss and not knowing what to do. However, this time, he had a feeling that he had grasped something. Although he did not know what it was, he had a feeling that somewhere in the high, endless starry sky, there must be a place where he could find this feeling. However, at this moment, he forgot that at this moment, he did not seem to have the ability to search the entire starry sky. The only outcome he could face was only to be lost in the unpredictable starry sky. At this critical moment, in the distance where Zhang Xiaohua was standing, which was also the direction that Zhang Xiaohua was heading in the high starry sky, there suddenly appeared a super strong storm. This storm was not simply a storm of air, but a storm formed by the endless yuan qi of heaven and earth. The endless yuan qi of heaven and earth seemed to have appeared from an inexplicable point, and immediately filled the space. The yuan qi of heaven and earth condensed continuously, and not long after, it formed two lifelike images. Auspicious dragon and phoenix. Zhang Xiaohua's ascending consciousness could not help but cry out, and once this cry came out, his consciousness fell rapidly like the last time. However, at this time, Zhang Xiaohua did not recall the feeling of falling, but only stared at the distant dragon and phoenix formed by the yuan qi of heaven and earth. He watched as the dragon and phoenix intertwined and danced in the starry sky, and slowly fell. Zhang Xiaohua's rapidly falling consciousness landed on his body, who was standing on the ground with his hands in his sleeves. Immediately, he opened his eyes as if he had been enlightened. He instantly released his consciousness, wanting to explore the yuan qi of heaven and earth in the sky. Unfortunately, although Zhang Xiaohua felt that his consciousness had improved greatly, he was still too far away from the dragon and phoenix, and could not see anything useful. With a sigh, Zhang Xiaohua withdrew his consciousness, and used his eyes to look at the sky in front of him, which was still covered with dark clouds and snowflakes. He could not help but shake his head, and said to himself, I don't know what happened in front, which could cause a change in the yuan qi of heaven and earth, and even affect the change in the way of heaven. The way of heaven is really unpredictable. Then, ignoring the snow on the ground, he sat cross-legged, and checked his gains from the oneness of heaven and man again. Sure enough, the starry sky that demonstrated the way of heaven was incomparably bright, clearer, and more inexplicably full of vitality. The way of heaven left a deeper outline in Zhang Xiaohua's consciousness, and at the same time, left a greater accumulation. After a long while, Zhang Xiaohua opened his eyes with a smile. This smile was so vivid, and seemed to be the same as a moment ago, but also seemed to be different. It seemed to have more understanding of life and death. Clapping his hands, Zhang Xiaohua stood up and looked deeply at the soil that had been covered by a thin layer of snow. There was a stray cat's body buried deep there. Yes, there was a cause and there was an effect. If he had not coincidentally witnessed the cat's death and buried its body, how could he have such an opportunity? Life and death, how could it be so easy to understand? How could the way of heaven be so easy to approach? Looking at the David's deer that was standing quietly beside him, Zhang Xiaohua floated up and patted its head calmly. Huan Huan raised its head and let out a long neigh, and happily ran back to the main road from the ground. It then walked to the center of the main road, and walked forward. Zhang Xiaohua sat on Huan Huan's back, and unconsciously looked back at the place where the cat had been knocked down. A thought rose from the bottom of his heart. If I could turn back time, maybe I could reach out and rescue this poor cat from under the carriage. Thinking of this, his heart suddenly moved, as if he had thought of something. After thinking about it carefully, his eyes unconsciously lit up, and he thought to himself, Cat, I really have to thank you. I just simply buried you, and you actually gave me endless benefits. If it was said that Zhang Xiaohua's cat's death, combined with his murderous aura, triggered another form of prying into the way of heaven, which was a deeper level of contact with life and death than the hundreds of forms of life, it was a guide for Zhang Xiaohua's future cultivation. What he had just learned was a direct guide for the difficult problem of practicing the Fist of the North Star in his heart. Of course it's impossible to turn back time, but the moves of the fist can be performed in reverse. The second stage of the Fist of the North Star should be practiced from the end to the end, but this from the end to the end is not simply linking the last move to the first move. This has been tried before, but it doesn't work. Instead, every move has to be performed in reverse. This way, from the last move to the first move can be smoothly performed. Understanding the key point, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but think, should I erect a tombstone for the cat, or give it a proper burial? But then he smiled. Separation of life and death was just a part of the way of heaven. Anything that did not break away from the way of heaven must go through this process. Sometimes the death was lighter than a goose feather. Sometimes the death was heavier than Mount Tai. To him, the cat's death was heavier than Mount Tai, but to the coachman, the cat's death was lighter than a goose feather. The cat did not care about the ceremony after its death, but he cared about the value of the cat's death. Instead of giving the cat an unimportant ceremony, it was better to keep the cat's death in his heart, as a warning to himself. Death was actually very simple, as long as he pointed his flying sword, a drop of blood. Death was also very complicated. Perhaps he might not be able to comprehend it in his lifetime. This sword was related to life and death, so he must not use it lightly in the future. Alas, who in this world could understand everything? In this wilderness, the life and death of a stray cat, Except for the current Zhang Xiaohua, who knew? But such a cat's death was exchanged for the lives of countless Jianghu people in the future. Even Zhang Xiaohua himself could not explain the cause and effect of this. Chapter 371. On the morning of the 9th day of the first lunar month, in a forest about 10 miles away from the east gate of Lu Town, a thin and tall young man stood on the crown of a big pine tree covered in white snow, facing the rising sun. He narrowed his eyes and stared at the distant morning sun with a faint smile on his lips. After a few breaths, he jumped down from the tree and started practicing his punching skills on the flat, snowy ground. After he finished practicing a set of boxing, he did not stop. He continued with a set of boxing that was similar to the previous one. If a martial arts master could identify it carefully, he would be able to see that the last set of boxing was simply the reverse of the previous set of boxing. This young man was naturally Zhang Xiaohua, who was walking towards the Guozhuang house. Since he entered the realm of oneness of heaven and men a few days ago, he had glimpsed a corner of the rules of life and death in the way of heaven. Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation seemed to have entered another realm. However, when he carefully checked his mental cultivation, he only took a big step forward. It was not the qualitative leap that he had imagined. However, Zhang Xiaohua knew very well that he must have made great progress in an aspect that he did not know about. It was the improvement in his daily understanding of the way of heaven. Since he did not understand what it was, he knew how to practice it. That was enough. On the other hand, the death of the stray cat had awakened the direction of upgrading the Fist of the North Star. Therefore, while Zhang Xiaohua continued to understand the way of heaven, he put his mind on the reversal of the Fist of the North Star. After 2 days of pondering and thinking, he finally understood all the 108 moves of the Fist of the North Star. Last night, Zhang Xiaohua tried it before he went to sleep. It was indeed effective. The inexplicable flow appeared from his right foot. With the moves of the Fist of the North Star, it was in the opposite direction from before. It tempered the bones one by one until it reached the bones of his left foot. As a matter of fact, Zhang Xiaohua suppressed his excitement and performed the Big Dipper magical fist technique 18 times. His bones were tempered 18 times. Zhang Xiaohua stopped and summoned the David's deer. He flew up and patted Huan Huan's head. Huan Huan's 4 hooves danced in the air as it flew toward Lu Town. Zhang Xiaohua sat cross-legged on Huan Huan's back. She closed her eyes and thought, Northern Dipper Divine Fist and Reverse Northern Dipper Divine Fist are both Northern Dipper Divine Fist. Wouldn't it be too troublesome to call them Northern Dipper Divine Fist? However, if that's the case, then the Misty School's Fist of the North Star manual will be incomplete. Thinking of the Misty School, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel sad for her second brother. Maybe I have to go home quickly and ask if my second brother has brought any news back home. If he hasn't, then I'll have to go to the fragrant cult. Haha. The fragrant cult is in the south. Sending Nie Qianyu there won't be any delay. Zhang Xiaohua looked ahead and thought slowly. Suddenly, the expression in Zhang Xiaohua's eyes changed. It turned out that in the sky not far away to the right, high up in the sky, a pure white cloud had suddenly been blown away. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and immediately released his divine sense. Sure enough, under the white cloud, the originally sparse chi of heaven and earth seemed to have been blown in, becoming denser and denser. Zhang Xiaohua's dragon and phoenix bringing prosperity was instantly equivalent to the chi of heaven and earth phenomenon that he saw when he entered the unity of heaven and man realm a few days ago. Could it be? Zhang Xiaohua was a little confused. Something strange is happening in front? Thus, Zhang Xiaohua urged his mount and quickly moved forward. In her divine sense, the yuan qi of heaven and earth in that direction slowly became denser. When Zhang Xiaohua arrived at Lu Town, she could already see part of the body of the dragon and phoenix. This, Zhang Xiaohua really didn't understand. However, when she arrived at Lu Town, Zhang Xiaohua had to turn east, which was the direction of the yuan qi of heaven and earth. She wasn't afraid of delaying her journey back to the Guozhuang house. Zhang Xiaohua tried to release her divine sense to observe the changes in the yuan qi of heaven and earth while urging the David's deer to rush to the Guozhuang house. At this time, the David's deer, Huan Huan, also seemed to feel a trace of change in the yuan qi of heaven and earth. It was a little uneasy and was a little bit afraid to go forward. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and gently stroked Huan Huan's neck to comfort her. But the more she went forward, the more anxious Huan Huan became, as if she was extremely afraid of the things in front of her. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense had already observed that the yuan qi of heaven and earth had revealed more than half of its body. This, isn't the Guozhuang house directly below the yuan qi of heaven and earth? Thinking of the yuan qi of heaven and earth, she naturally thought of the spring water that was rich in the yuan qi of heaven and earth at home. She didn't think too much. The change in the yuan qi must be related to her home. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. She patted the head of the David's deer and floated up. She went straight to the dead trees in the snow by the roadside and flew straight to the Guozhuang house. The David's deer, Huan, slowed down and strolled forward slowly. The David's deer could smell the yuan qi on Zhang Xiaohua's body. So Zhang Xiaohua was not afraid that Huan couldn't find her. Zhang Xiaohua's levitation technique was fast and she moved forward in a straight line. Not long after, she could clearly see everything in the Guozhuang house with her divine sense. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't care less about observing the changes in the yuan qi of heaven and earth. Instead, she looked greedily at her own small courtyard. In the past 5 years, the small courtyard of the Zhang family had changed a lot. The original mud hut had been overturned and changed into a big blue stone house. The low mud wall had disappeared and was replaced by a very high blue stone wall. The low fence gate had also been replaced by the gate of a decent big family. At this time, there seemed to be no one in the small courtyard. There were several bluestone houses of the same size with the same gate. Zhang Kai, Mr. Lu Kai, and an old man who looked familiar to Zhang Xiaohua were anxiously talking about something. What surprised Zhang Xiaohua the most was that the east house of the courtyard was emitting a red light. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense couldn't penetrate it. At this time, a person came out of the house. Wasn't it the girl she saved in Shizue Mountain, Li Yinfeng? She looked panicked and said something to the old man in the courtyard who Zhang Xiaohua was not familiar with. Then she hurried back to the house. The old man turned around and said something to Zhang Kai and others. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly remembered that this was Li Yinfeng's father, old shopkeeper Li. What? What's going on? What's in the room? What? Li Yinfeng, old shopkeeper Li. Why are they in my house? Zhang Xiaohua was completely confused. Looking at the dragon and phoenix yuan qi in the sky that couldn't be seen with the naked eye, Zhang Xiaohua forcefully circulated the qi in her body and sped up the levitation technique. A shadow appeared and Zhang Xiaohua flew towards the Guozhuang house. When Zhang Xiaohua was about to reach the Guozhuang house, she saw that there were too many villagers in the village and it was no longer suitable for levitation. Zhang Xiaohua twisted her body, made a hand seal, and drilled into the ground. She thought she would get lost, but once she went underground, she felt a strong yuan qi fluctuation in front of her. It seemed like she had a direction to guide her. Zhang Xiaohua activated the earth elemental escape and went there. When she got close, Zhang Xiaohua jumped out from the ground. When she looked up, she saw that it was the small courtyard where her father and Mr. Lu were. She was standing behind them. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were filled with tears. Finally, she didn't go in the wrong direction. At this time Mr. Lu said, "Lu Kai, go out and see Xiaolong. Why isn't he back yet? It's just looking for a midwife. Why is it taking so long? I think Qian won't be able to hold on for much longer." When these words entered her ears, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood. So her little nephew was about to come into the world. At the same time, she released her divine sense. Seeing that the dragon and phoenix in the sky had stopped above her small courtyard, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but be shocked. What kind of battle formation was this? Beside them, old shopkeeper Li comforted. "Brother Lu, don't worry. Sister-in-law Zhang and my wife are both inside. Although they aren't specialized midwives, they have a lot of experience. My wife has been vegetarian and praying to Buddha for the past few years. She has also helped a lot of people deliver babies for a living. There won't be too big of a problem." But Mr. Lu only started, but he couldn't finish his words. He could only look at Zhang Kai. Both of them smiled bitterly. "That's right, your wife has helped a lot of people deliver babies, but they were all normal babies. The unborn baby in this house had stayed in his mother's stomach for 5 years. This morning, he suddenly had abdominal pain and knew it wasn't good. He could only ask Zhang Xiaolong to go out and look for a midwife." This situation naturally couldn't be directly told to old shopkeeper Li. Lu Kai listened to his father's orders and nodded. Father, don't worry. A mother relies on her son. Little sister will definitely be fine. I'll go out and take a look. Jin Feng is with Xiaolong, so there won't be too much of a delay. After saying this, he turned around and walked out of the small courtyard. But when he turned around, he saw Zhang Xiaohua who had just walked behind them. He couldn't help calling out, Xiaolong, why are you alone? Where's the midwife? Xiaolong? When everyone heard this, they all turned around. Zhang Xiaohua had 3 brothers. Zhang Xiaolong's face was long and thin, while Zhang Xiaohu had a round face. When Zhang Xiaohua was young, she had a 60% resemblance to her second brother. As for Zhang Xiaohua, she was already very tall. Although her face was still the same as when she left home, her face was elongated. Therefore, with a single glance, she was 80% similar to Zhang Xiaolong, only she was a lot younger. Lu Kai and old shopkeeper Li first found it strange that Zhang Xiaohua came back alone without a midwife, so they looked behind him. Mr. Lu was also curious, but then he frowned. He was very confused, as if he already felt that this wasn't his usual son-in-law. But who was this strange young man? For a moment, he was stunned. Only Zhang Kai turned around and knew that it wasn't Zhang Xiaolong. But he was also confused for a moment. Then he was pleasantly surprised. His eyes couldn't hide the excitement as he anxiously took a step forward. Reaching out his hand, he trembled as he probed. Xiaohua? Are you Xiaohua? Even though Zhang Xiaohua had just experienced the trials of life and death, she still couldn't resist the affection of father and son in this world. She took a few steps forward and held Zhang Kai's trembling hand with both hands, saying, Father, it's me. I'm Xiaohua. I'm back. Hearing this, everyone's eyes in the courtyard lit up. Lu Kai and old shopkeeper Li's gaze also attracted from the still-closed courtyard door to this young man who looked very similar to Zhang Xiaolong. Qidian Chinese website welcomes readers to read the latest, fastest, and hottest serial works at Qidian Originals. Chapter 372. Zhang Kai's hands tightly grasped Zhang Xiaohua's hands. His right hand rubbed his eyes in disbelief, using the opportunity to wipe away some of the moisture in his eyes. He looked up and down at Zhang Xiaohua, smiling so widely that he couldn't close his mouth. He only said, Good, good. It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. But then, he turned his head and quietly wiped away his tears. He seemed to be very happy, but also seemed to have thought of something. Before Mr. Lu and Lu Kai could speak, old shopkeeper Li hurried forward from the side. He saluted and said, Xiaoxia Zhang, do you still remember this old man? Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly returned the salute and said, Uncle Li, please don't be so polite. You are Li Jinfeng's brother Li's father. You are my elder. I really can't accept your courtesy. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua respond so politely, Zhang Kai also pulled old shopkeeper Li's hand and said, Old brother, Xiaohua is only a child. You don't have to be so polite with him. Old shopkeeper Li repeatedly waved his hand and said, Old brother Zhang, I will never forget the favor of saving my life. Moreover, Xiaoxia Zhang saved the lives of our family of 3 in one go. He even almost lost his life because of it. Zhang Xiaohua was greatly embarrassed and said, Uncle Li, just call me Xiaohua. I really can't stand being called Xiaoxia Zhang. Mr. Lu also smiled at the side and said, Zhang Xiaohua, it's better to call you Xiaohua. Let the people of the Jianghu call you Xiaoxia Zhang. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua also hurried forward and saluted. Mr. Lu chuckled and helped him up. Then, Zhang Xiaohua and Lu Kai both saluted each other. Only then did they stand still. Just as they were about to speak, suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua's nose smelled an extremely rich and light fragrance descending from the sky. At this moment, all the pores on his body didn't wait for him to circulate his energy. They all opened up and absorbed this extremely strange fragrance as if they were absorbing starlight at night. At this moment, the people in the courtyard seemed to have noticed something different. They looked at each other and twitched their noses, searching for the source of the fragrance. Only Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense. He clearly saw that the dragon and phoenix Yuanqi in the sky had already descended to the sky above the small house. The dragon and phoenix formed by the Yuanqi seemed to be real, dancing in the sky. After a long while, the dragon and phoenix flew towards the sky above the small house from different directions and silently collided. The dragon and phoenix instantly disappeared and turned into countless petals that floated down. Heavenly maidens scattering petals. This phrase inexplicably flashed in Zhang Xiaohua's mind. As early as when Zhang Xiaohua used the oneness of heaven and man technique, he saw the majestic dragon and phoenix Yuan-Qi in the starry sky. At this moment, it turned into a rain of petals and fell down, covering the entire sky above the Guozhuang house. Only a small part of the rain of petals seeped into the small house in the courtyard. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense with all his strength. Other than the Yuan-Qi that directly fell into the small house, he didn't disturb it. Most of the scattered Yuan-Qi were drawn into his small courtyard by him and absorbed with all his strength. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was already in the 6th layer of the Qi refining realm. He could already control the Yuan-Qi to the smallest detail. In addition to his powerful divine sense and the help of his Dantian's core, he absorbed all the scattered Yuan-Qi outside the small house into his own meridians like a whale swallowing seawater. As for the Yuan-Qi above the small house, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to act rashly. Of course, he wouldn't compete with his little nephew. However, the small house was still covered by the red light that couldn't be seen by the naked eye. His divine sense couldn't know the use of the Yuan-Qi. After a while, the scattered Yuan-Qi of heaven and earth had become sparse. Suddenly, an inexplicable sound of music entered his mind, as if it was ringing in his heart. Zhang Xiaohua was about to use his divine sense to look when he heard a burst of exclamations in the small house. The red light that covered the small house immediately changed to a brilliant golden brilliance. Zhang Xiaohua frowned. When he was hesitating whether he should use his divine sense to look or not, he heard the door of the small house open. Li Yinfeng ran out with a pale face and whispered, oh no, Sister Qian, she gave birth to a monster." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned at first. Sister Qian, But then he was even more stunned. A monster. It wasn't just Zhang Xiaohua. Everyone in the courtyard was shocked. They all asked, what monster? A big lotus. Qian gave birth to a big lotus. It's true, a big lotus. Ah! Everyone was dumbfounded. Lotus? Little Feng, are you seeing things? Lu Kai stepped forward and held Li Yinfeng's hand. He asked anxiously. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. These two were so intimate. Could it be? Sure enough, Li Yinfeng's hand trembled. She couldn't finish the sentence and said, it's true, husband. I really saw it. Mother and Auntie Gua were so scared that they couldn't move. That lotus, it could open and close as if it was blooming. At this time, Li Yinfeng also saw Zhang Xiaohua. She shouted, Xiaolong, why don't you go in and take a look? Zhang Xiaohua rubbed her nose. She was very embarrassed. Sister-in-law was giving birth. How could she dare to go in? Seeing this, Mr. Liu didn't have time to explain. He said to Li Yinfeng, Little Fenger, you're brave. We can't go in. You should go in and take a look. Don't cause any big trouble. Li Yinfeng was a little puzzled. She looked at Zhang Xiaohua and nodded. Okay, father. She was about to go in. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua saw through her divine sense that the door of the small house was shining with a golden light. It was as if something was about to come out. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. She quickly took out the small sword and looked at the door nervously. Sure enough, when the golden light appeared in the small courtyard, Zhang Xiaohua saw her mother holding a big round ball and walking out. The ball was wrapped in a layer of flowing golden light. It was like flowing water that kept flowing. From time to time, it emitted a golden light that couldn't be seen by the naked eye. When Zhang Xiaohua looked with her eyes, she saw that the golden light was imitating the shape of a lotus flower. As the light radiated, it imitated the opening and closing of a lotus flower. At this time, Gua Sufei's face was pale. She bit her lips and her hands were trembling. Step by step, she slowly walked to the center of the small courtyard. Except for Zhang Xiaohua, who was still standing on the spot with a small sword in her hand, the others all took a few steps back in fear. Their faces were filled with nervousness and fear. Everyone's retreat naturally made Zhang Xiaohua stand out. Although Gua Sufei's eyes were blurred and frightened, when she saw Zhang Xiaohua, she was pleasantly surprised. She called out, Xiaohua, Although her voice was low, Zhang Xiaohua heard it clearly. She replied with tears in her eyes. "Mother, I'm back." Guo Sufei nodded, hinting her to step back a bit. But Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "Mother, it's okay." Then she looked around and said, "Mother, put it on this stone table." Guo Sufei still shook her head, but her eyes were looking at the door of the small courtyard. How could Zhang Xiaohua not know her mother's intention? She walked straight over and said, "Mother, it's okay. Let me see." How could Guo Sufei let her get close? She took a few steps back and said with a trembling voice, "Xiaohua, you stay away, stay away." Zhang Xiaohua stopped and said, "Mother, you've forgotten. That year, I was the one who saw that eldest sister-in-law was pregnant." Guo Sufei was stunned. Zhang Xiaohua continued, "Give this to me. I'll see what's going on." Guo Sufei asked, "Is it really okay?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "It's okay. Mother, it's just my nephew or niece. What's there to be afraid of?" After saying that, she took a few steps forward and took the lotus from Guo Sufei's hand. Seeing this, Guo Sufei could only comply. But she still followed behind Zhang Xiaohua, feeling extremely worried. The lotus that the ball turned into was very similar. It also felt like a lotus in her hand. Zhang Xiaohua walked to the side of the stone table and placed the lotus on it. She looked at it with her eyes. It was just like a real lotus. She couldn't see any abnormalities. It was just that the lotus kept opening and closing, which made people feel strange. Zhang Xiaohua immediately released her divine sense and carefully observed the ball. As soon as she released her divine sense, Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. What kind of ball was this? This was clearly a mysterious array formed by countless golden talismans that looked like tadpoles. Those countless golden talismans seemed to be alive. They were colluding together and constantly rotating in the air like flowing water. When Zhang Xiaohua immersed her divine sense into one of the tadpole-like talismans, she was shocked to find that this talisman was also formed by countless talismans. Those tiny talismans were also like tadpoles, intertwined together. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but be tongue-tied. This was far beyond her imagination. It was far beyond the array and prohibition that she knew. She could only vaguely feel that the entire ball array seemed to have existed since the beginning. It was not something that could be formed by human strength. It was also not something that could be broken by human strength. As for those tiny talismans, Zhang Xiaohua simply used his divine sense to know that the intricate structure of the talismans was millions of times more powerful than the array formation that she had obtained from Fire Dragon Immortal on the deserted island. Yes, perhaps even more. But this difference was not something that Zhang Xiaohua could understand. What should I do? The child is probably in this array. If I can't break this array, the child will not be able to come out. But this array, I think no one in the world can break it. What is going on? Sister-in-law only drank the spring water that was rich in vitality. I only gave her a small vitality stone. How could it give birth to such a strange thing? Moreover, it is protected by this innate array? That's right, the dragon and phoenix bringing prosperity in the morning, and the heavenly maiden scattering flowers just now, and even the sound of a musical instrument, they were all for this child, right? But since there was a natural phenomenon, the vine should have fallen when the melon ripened, and the vine should have fallen when the time was ripe. Thinking about this, Zhang Xiaohua turned to look at her mother who was standing beside her. Guo Sufei's expression seemed to have calmed down. Perhaps it was because she saw another son, or perhaps it was because she believed in her son's ability. When the others saw this, they all took a few steps forward. Other than Zhang Kai and Mr. Lu who stood beside Zhang Xiaohua, the others still kept a distance. Zhang Xiaohua sighed. Just as she was about to tell her mother, the golden array happened to turn in a direction. Zhang Xiaohua inadvertently looked at it with her divine sense and could not help but be happy. There are many stories that have yet to be told. The interest of the faction is paramount. This is the rule of survival for every faction in the Jianghu. If there is a faction that selflessly helps the Misty School, that would be strange. Chapter 373. In her divine sense, there was a narrow slit in the flawless, perfectly round and seamless array formed by golden tadpole-like talismans. A strange fragrance came out from that narrow slit. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. Her divine sense immediately probed into the slit. Only then did she discover that the array was only a thin layer, but inside this thin space, there were hundreds of millions of arrays made up of countless tadpole-like talismans. That array was actually made up of hundreds of millions of layers of arrays. However, Zhang Xiaohua was deeply aware that this array was definitely not as simple as adding one layer after another. Inside the spherical array there was dense purple qi, and inside the purple qi was a chubby male baby. His eyes and mouth were tightly closed, and he had a solemn look. Zhang Xiaohua didn't have time to think about other things for the time being. She first raised her head and said to Guo Sufei with a smile, "Mother, congratulations, it's a boy. But wait a moment, I'll see how to get him out." Guo Sufei was overjoyed. The fear in her eyes disappeared and was replaced by a look of ecstasy. The people around were also happy and wanted to look forward. Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said, "Mother, you and father should all step back. I don't want any accidents to happen. I want to take a careful look first and think of a good idea." Guo Sufei quickly nodded and stepped back with the others, keeping a certain distance. When the others were far away, Zhang Xiaohua carefully looked at the mysterious innate array again. The slit of the sphere seemed to be natural, and the tadpole-like talismans beside the slit seemed to have no connection at all. However, Zhang Xiaohua knew that the slit was definitely not there originally. The original array must be perfectly round without any slit, and the slit must be the inevitable result of the array's operation to a certain stage. Zhang Xiaohua touched her chin with her hand and pondered. She thought that her little nephew was definitely not born at full term. Looking at the size of the slit, it was much earlier. If he was born at full term, he would definitely be in human form, and not a fetus protected by the array. Alas, it had been 5 years, and it was just a small slit. If he was born at full term, who knew how many years it would take? Fortunately, there was a little clue and a direction to break through, so Zhang Xiaohua carefully observed the tadpoles on both sides of the slit. The flowing tadpoles seemed to show signs of separation, but there was a faintly discernible force that firmly bound them together. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She continued to look in the direction of the slit. As expected, in the array of the sphere along the slit, the energy of the array was obviously weaker than the surrounding energy. Zhang Xiaohua naturally understood that this was where the array would be divided into 2 halves. Only by starting from here could the array be divided into 2 halves. However, did Zhang Xiaohua have the ability to do so? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua tightened his grip on the small sword. He knew that at this moment, only his small sword could help him. However, it was hard to say if it would be effective. After all, he had only used the small sword to break through ordinary restrictions and arrays, such as the small box that contained the Carefree Heart Sutra, and the cave that was sealed by Fire Dragon Venerable. However, he had no confidence in breaking through this array. Zhang Xiaohua held the small sword with his left hand and wanted to take out the vitality stones from his pocket. However, he laughed bitterly in his heart. Previously, when he used the small sword with his left hand, the energy used by the small sword did not seem to be the vital energy in his meridians. Even if he took out the crouching ox stone from his money bag, it would probably be useless. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua hesitated. However, just in case, Zhang Xiaohua still took out a piece and placed it in his hand. Then, he used his divine sense to lock onto the slit and raised the small sword in his hand slightly. At this moment, he heard Guo Sufei's surprised voice. "Xiaohua, what are you doing?" Zhang Xiaohua could only turn around and explain. "Mother, the child is in this sphere. I have to cut it open." "Sphere? Isn't this a big lotus flower?" "Oh yes, mother. You have to cut open the lotus seed pod of this lotus flower." "But, Xiaohua, you won't hurt the child inside, right?" Yes, Guo Sufei had not seen her little grandson yet. How could she let Zhang Xiaohua use this small dagger-like thing to harm her little grandson? Even the lotus flower outside would not be able to do so. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Don't worry, mother. I definitely won't. I'm confident. That's for sure. There won't be any problems. I don't know what the dense purple qi in the sphere array is, but it seems to have some incredible vitality. As long as I have the protection of the purple qi, I won't be hurt by the sphere array. How can I hurt the child inside?" Zhang Xiaohua thought to himself. Then all right. However, Xiaohua, you must be careful. You must not hurt the child. especially the child's penis. What? Zhang Xiaohua almost fell over. However, it was understandable. Things that could carry on the family line were naturally very precious. Zhang Xiaohua took a deep breath and slowly raised her left hand again. At this time, another person spoke. It was Zhang Kai. He said, Xiaohua. Ah. What's wrong, father? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. That you must be careful. Especially the last thing your mother said just now. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. She smiled and said, I know, father. I know what to do. Then, he looked around again. Everyone looked at each other and quietly waited for instructions. When no one spoke, he said, Then I'll start. Zhang Xiaohua turned around again. She stretched out her left hand and raised the small sword. She used her divine sense to firmly lock onto the crack on the round ball. When the crack rotated to the top, Zhang Xiaohua took a deep breath. Her left hand moved like lightning and directly cut towards the bottom of the crack. Sure enough, as Zhang Xiaohua used the sword in her left hand, an inexplicable heat flow appeared somewhere on her left arm. It flowed along the small sword's arm and along the small sword's arm. When the small sword pierced into the crack, the heat flow also reached the small sword in time. There was no strong reaction, nor was there any glaring brilliance. When the small sword and the tadpole talisman came in contact, it immediately produced an incomparably huge suction force. It sucked away all the heat flow on Zhang Xiaohua's left arm. At the same time, the tadpoles that had absorbed the energy seemed to have eaten something full. They swam to the sides, and the crack naturally stretched down a little. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. However, this nameless heat flow was not controlled by him, so he could not activate it. Fortunately, the heat flow in his left arm did not. Instead, it was produced from somewhere and continued to travel up his arm. Therefore, as the heat flow in his left arm continued to enter, the crack also became longer and longer. If there was enough heat flow in Zhang Xiaohua's body, the crack would be completely pulled open sooner or later. Unfortunately, even Zhang Xiaohua himself did not know how much heat flow there was. He could only slowly pray in his heart. Unfortunately, the heavens had always been against people's wishes. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua felt that the heat flow in his left arm was much smaller. He knew that things were not good. He hurriedly absorbed the vitality from the vitality stone in his right hand. However, when the vitality entered his body, it only filled his meridians and did not change the intensity of the heat flow in the slightest. What should I do now? The crack on the round ball formation is not big enough. I can't reach out and carry the child out. Just as he was thinking, there was no more heat flow in his left arm. The small sword could no longer cut it. However, at this moment, something abnormal happened. The purple gas in the round ball formation seemed to be attracted by something. It flowed along the tip of the small sword into Zhang Xiaohua's left arm. It also formed a warm flow. It followed another path up his left arm until it disappeared. After a moment, another warm flow was produced. It flowed from the original path to the small sword. The tadpole-like talisman was expelled by this warm flow. It was like boiling water pouring on snow, separating into two sides. Zhang Xiaohua was ecstatic. There was a lot of purple gas in the round ball. It had already formed a cycle with the warm flow in his left arm. Presumably, it would not be long before the crack was large enough. While cutting open the formation effortlessly, Zhang Xiaohua pondered. The purple gas must be the key to breaking the formation. However, to directly use the purple gas to break the formation, it would take a long time. This period of time might be the time when the baby was gestating in his sister-in-law's body. Now that the baby was born prematurely, with the purple gas alone, it might be possible to break the formation in a few decades. However, it was not in his sister-in-law's body. It was unknown whether it would harm the baby's growth. Now, the purple gas could be used to break the formation in a short period of time. It must be a special method. Again, she did not know whether it would harm the baby's growth. However, since things had come to this point, this was the only way. It was inconceivable to let the round formation of the lotus stay in the Zhang family's small courtyard in the Guozhuang house for several decades. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the crack was large enough. Zhang Xiaohua wanted to withdraw the small sword and carry her little nephew out of the formation. However, the formation seemed to have a strong suction force. No matter how hard Zhang Xiaohua tried, she could not pull it out at all. Left with no choice, Zhang Xiaohua could only continue to absorb the purple gas and use the warm flow to break open the round ball. In the eyes of Zhang Kai, Guo Sufei, and the rest, Zhang Xiaohua's inconspicuous small sword pierced into the lotus. The lotus stopped opening and closing and bloomed little by little. Everyone held their breaths and watched carefully, afraid that they would disturb Zhang Xiaohua's actions. As Zhang Xiaohua's small sword broke the formation, the lotus bloomed more and more. After the time it took to eat a meal, the entire round ball was split into two. In everyone's eyes, the lotus bloomed completely. In an instant, the entire small courtyard was filled with a strange fragrance. At this moment, the baby in the purple gas suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were looking straight into Zhang Xiaohua's eyes. When their eyes met, Zhang Xiaohua instantly felt like she was being sucked into darkness. Chapter 374. It was just absolute darkness. Not only was he unable to see, even his heart was a ball of darkness. However, in this place where there was no light, Zhang Xiaohua felt very safe. It was as if the surrounding darkness was filled with an extremely familiar yet absolutely unfamiliar existence. Zhang Xiaohua thought carefully. Wasn't this existence the heavenly Tao that he had sensed when he was in the state of the union of heaven and man in Songning Town and outside Pingyang City? Zhang Xiaohua wanted to move his hand, but he did not have any intuition. Zhang Xiaohua wanted to blink, but he did not have any intuition either. It was as if he was just a consciousness without any form. After an unknown period of time, an instant, perhaps 10,000 years, or even longer, Zhang Xiaohua did not seem to have any sense of time. At a point extremely far away or extremely near, there was a sudden change. First, it vibrated continuously, emitting a mysterious wave that instantly spread throughout the entire space. That point turned from endless darkness to transparency, then red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, all the way to purple. Every color evolved into a wave that spread throughout the entire space. Finally, the purple wave lasted for the longest time, and the wave was also the most intense. The entire space was actually filled with the same dense purple chi as the spherical array formation. Zhang Xiaohua was greatly shocked. What was going on? Why did he see something? Then, an even more puzzling change appeared. After the purple color passed, the entire space stopped vibrating. There was only silence for a moment. All the colors that were mentioned just now appeared at that point, and the entire space was filled with the 7 types of fluctuations. At this moment, that point suddenly lit up, and a ray of white light flashed from there. In an instant, the white light filled the entire space, and the chaotic fluctuations in the space changed into a more mysterious vibration at the same time. The sudden appearance of the light made Zhang Xiaohua a little dizzy. He subconsciously wanted to cover it with his hand, but before his feeling could reach his arm, there was a complete change at that point. That invisible point suddenly collapsed, and then like an explosion, it expanded infinitely in an instant. In the blink of an eye, it exceeded Zhang Xiaohua's perception. The space that was just a single material was immediately filled with light and other inexplicable things. Where did this light come from? Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself. This state of chaos did not last for long. The heavenly Tao that Zhang Xiaohua was familiar with filled the entire space. In the blink of an eye, the space evolved into earth, fire, wind, and thunder. Endless matter and countless miracles were completed in an instant before Zhang Xiaohua's eyes. Following that, countless planets appeared. Each planet emitted boundless starlight. On these planets life appeared. Some of these life forms lived in a daze, while others had the ability to move mountains and fill seas. Zhang Xiaohua was dumbfounded. Completely dumbfounded. Even with his cultivation level of the 6th layer, he couldn't understand what was happening in front of him. What on earth was this? With his limited knowledge, he could only make a hazy guess. Was this life? However, he immediately thought of something. What was death? In the instant that he thought about it, the things in the space seemed to have passed through countless years. The fluctuations of the entire space slowly became chaotic. Countless planets shrank and collapsed, and then the entire space collapsed. After that, this collapse slowly shrank again, as if it was the reverse of the explosion and expansion just now. It shrank again into a small point, and the light also returned to this point. 7 colors flashed, and then it returned to endless darkness. Was this death? Zhang Xiaohua thought. However, before he could think further, his eyes lit up. The scene in front of him changed, and he returned to the small courtyard of the Guozhuang house. In front of him was still that newborn baby, whose bright eyes were staring at Zhang Xiaohua. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua felt that his spiritual sense could move freely again. He unconsciously released it, and it enveloped the entire stone table. On the stone table, the formation that had already been cut in half was closing up at a speed visible to his spiritual sense. As it closed up, the dense purple qi in the original sphere was also divided into two halves, each of which enveloped the baby. The faint purple qi that covered the baby's body also seemed to seep in, shrinking into the baby's skin. Zhang Xiaohua roughly scanned the baby's body with his spiritual sense. He couldn't help but be shocked again. There were actually countless meridians in the baby's body, all of which were absorbing the purple qi outside the body. The meridians that he cultivated from the Carefree Heart Sutra were shockingly among them. At this moment, no matter how stupid Zhang Xiaohua was, he knew that a great opportunity was in front of him. He didn't dare to be careless, and immediately scanned the baby's body with his spiritual sense. At this moment, the baby's body also seemed to be transparent, as if there was no obstruction that blocked his spiritual sense. Zhang Xiaohua frantically memorized. In just a few breaths of time, the thin purple qi on the baby's body was completely absorbed. In an instant, the baby's meridians flickered a few times before disappearing. No matter how Zhang Xiaohua scanned, he found nothing. However, a faint smile appeared on Zhang Xiaohua's lips. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was about to withdraw his spiritual sense, the two halves of the formation on the stone table had already closed up, forming two spheres of the same size that emitted a golden brilliance. Just like the complete spherical formation from before, countless tadpole-like glyphs flowed with brilliant light. Just as Zhang Xiaohua's spiritual sense focused on the two spheres, the sphere seemed to sense something and suddenly flew up from the stone table, flying towards Zhang Xiaohua's forehead. However, just as they flew halfway, one of the spheres suddenly changed direction. With a turn, it directly entered the baby's forehead on the stone table. The remaining sphere didn't change at all. When it approached Zhang Xiaohua's forehead, it turned into a ray of golden light and shot into it. The golden light entered Zhang Xiaohua's forehead and went straight into the Naiwen Palace of the Upper Dantian. In the Naiwen Palace, the essence of elixir that Zhang Xiaohua had painstakingly cultivated was slowly rotating. The golden light rotated in the Naiwen Palace and immediately covered the essence of elixir with a layer of golden light. However, the golden light didn't stay in the Naiwen Palace for long. After leaving the Naiwen Palace, it went straight to a mysterious place behind the head. Once it entered, there was no more sound. It wasn't the first time Zhang Xiaohua sensed that mysterious place. Back when he was on the deserted island, when the refining elixir heart with jade blood technique reached its end, Zhang Xiaohua's Naiwen Palace was about to be scorched by the internal fire. However, after the golden light entered, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't find any trace of it. Zhang Xiaohua sensed that the golden light entered a mysterious place behind the head and was very surprised. Before he could think about it, the baby on the stone table changed again. The golden light entered the Naiwen Palace between the eyebrows. In an instant, the baby's body shone with golden light and a golden shadow stood up from the baby's body. It looked like an adult. The adult baby pointed one hand to the sky and the other to the ground. There was a benevolent smile on the corner of his mouth. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. What did this mean? When the shadow finished laughing, it first expanded and then rapidly shrank. It also entered the Naiwen Palace between the eyebrows and disappeared. At this time, the baby, in Zhang Xiaohua's mind, didn't have any abnormalities. It was the same as any ordinary person that he saw on a daily basis. There wasn't even the slightest fluctuation of the qi of heaven and earth. However, Zhang Xiaohua stood there in a daze. His mind didn't dare to relax for a moment. Today's encounter was really too magical. Everything was unimaginable. Perhaps in the next moment, there would be a miracle that had never been seen before. Even if now, this baby who was still sleeping soundly with his eyes closed immediately grew up and called him uncle with a smile, or could immediately fly into the sky, he would believe it without hesitation. However, at this moment, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly felt that someone was pulling his sleeve. Could it be the hand of Tian Dao? He felt a sweep of his divine sense. How was it the heavenly Dao? It was just his mother carefully tugging at him. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly retracted his mind and asked, "Mother, what's the matter? Guo Sufei was ecstatic and asked with a trembling voice, Xiaohua, that, is the child well? Can I hold him? This way, I don't want my good grandson to freeze. After all, it's still winter. This child who has just been born can't be frozen at all. Zhang Xiaohua was startled and turned his head to look. Of course, there was nothing on the stone table. There was only a white and fat naked baby sleeping soundly with his eyes closed. It made people feel pain and pity for him. Zhang Xiaohua thought to himself, Mother, don't worry. Even if I freeze, your good grandson won't have the slightest problem. However, he still didn't feel at ease and asked, Mother, what did you see just now? What did I see? Guo Sufei was startled and immediately said proudly, Xiaohua, you've really grown up. Where did you learn the sword? It's so powerful that you could split the lotus with just one strike. It's really much more powerful than Butcher Lu's butcher's knife. And you just stood there without moving after splitting the lotus. We didn't dare to disturb you, but isn't the child still young? He can't catch a cold. Look, can I carry him back to the house? From what his mother said, from the time he split the lotus to her pulling his sleeve, it was only a very short period of time. However, in this very short period of time, he encountered something that others would never be able to understand in their entire lives. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the small sword in his left hand and smiled bitterly. He put it in his arms and said, Of course you can. Mother, quickly carry the child back to the house. When Guo Sufei heard this, she was overjoyed. She hurried forward and carefully held the baby in her arms. However, the moment the baby touched Guo Sufei, he immediately opened his mouth and cried loudly. The cry was very loud and clear, echoing throughout the small courtyard. At this moment, a surprised voice sounded. Ah? Mother, the child has been born? Is Xianxia okay? Zhang Xiaohua turned around and saw that the door of the small courtyard had just been pushed open. A young man who was as tall as him was running towards the direction of the crying baby with a face full of surprise. That young and thin face looked 80% similar to Zhang Xiaohua's. Wasn't he Zhang Xiaohua's eldest brother, Zhang Xiaolong? Behind Zhang Xiaolong was an old woman with a depressed face. There was no need to look. Just by looking at her, one could tell that this was a midwife who didn't make it in time. Chapter 375. Hearing the child's cries, Zhang Xiaolong rushed into the small courtyard. Ignoring the people in the courtyard, he ran straight to his mother's side and looked at his child with concern. When he saw the child, he couldn't help but frown and ask, Mother, why didn't you wrap the child in a quilt when you took him out? It's so cold. Won't the child freeze? Guo Sufei smiled bitterly and was about to say something when the depressed midwife who had rushed over from behind revealed a happy expression. She said in an exaggerated tone, Io, look at you. You don't have any experience at all. In such a cold day, you actually carried the child out without a blanket. Based on my experience, this child will definitely be in constant pain in the future. Quick, give it to me and let me see. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaolong's face was also full of worry. He wanted to say something, but when he looked at his mother, he swallowed his words back. The midwife walked forward and was about to take the baby. Just as she reached out, she immediately retracted her hand in shock and shouted, Oh, why is this baby like this? Zhang Xiaolong was stunned. He carefully looked at the child in front of him, but he couldn't see any abnormalities. Zhang Xiaohua was also puzzled. Could it be that the midwife could see some clues? But at this moment, even her divine sense couldn't detect any abnormalities. In the end, the midwife said in fear, I've delivered babies my whole life. Newborn babies are all wrinkled like little old men. They're extremely ugly. It's only after they're a month old that they'll slowly grow white and plump. They're completely unlike your baby, who was born so beautiful. She's an evildoer. An evildoer. After saying that, she didn't even have time to say the reason she wanted to stay. She quickly turned around and ran away, leaving only Zhang Xiaolong behind. He opened his mouth and said, Granny Li, you haven't received the money. But seeing the speed at which the old granny ran out of the small courtyard, he muttered to himself, this old granny actually ran so fast. So it turns out that she was dawdling at home, taking a dump and peeing, and only saying that she couldn't walk, It was just to get more money from me. At this time, another figure that Zhang Xiaohua was very familiar with limped into the small courtyard. Wasn't that young master Li Jinfeng? Li Jinfeng shouted, Xiaolong, what's going on? Granny Li had brought the child out so quickly? Even so, you should at least leave some food for him. Wouldn't it be extremely rude to just let him go like this? At this moment, Zhang Xiaolong had no time to explain to him. He hurriedly said to Guo Sufei, Mother, quickly carry the child into the house. It's warm inside. Guo Sufei seemed to wake up from a dream. She quickly ran into the house with the baby in her arms. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's face was a little gloomy. She reached out and took out the small sword. She frowned and thought for a while. Then she slowly put it back into her clothes. She seemed to have made her own decision. Other people in the small courtyard, such as Zhang Kai and Mr. Liu, looked at what was happening in front of them as if they were watching a play. They had no chance to interrupt. When Guo Sufei carried the child into the house, they also seemed to wake up from a dream. Zhang Kai asked, Xiaolong, what's going on now? Why did you take so long to invite Granny Li over? When Zhang Xiaolong saw his father blaming him, he helplessly replied, Father, when my own child was born, how could I not be anxious? Young Master Li and I had already arrived at Granny Li's house, but this old thing just kept dawdling. One moment she said her stomach hurt, the next moment she said her feet hurt. I gave her more money, but she still said we were all from the neighboring village, so I didn't need to be polite. I didn't know what she meant until I accidentally said the wrong amount of money, saying it was 3 coins. Li Jinfeng next to him also laughed. Uncle Zhang, don't blame Xiaolong. You see, when I fell from the donkey, Xiaolong didn't even bother to help me. He only pulled Granny Li and hurried on. Zhang Xiaolong asked apologetically, Young Master Li, I'm really sorry. How are your injuries? Li Jinfeng waved his hand and said, It's fine, it's fine. No matter what, I'm still a rider. This is just a small accident. Zhang Kai wanted to speak again, but Mr. Liu next to him laughed and said, It's really a lucky hit. Old brother Zhang, Xiaolong's delay is really wonderful. If that Granny Li came in time, even if Xiaohua came back in time, the strange phenomenon just now would be known by outsiders. Maybe, and that's for sure. This Granny Li will definitely spread the news of the strange phenomenon just now. If this was known by outsiders, this child's life will be in big trouble. Everyone in the small courtyard suddenly understood. Only Zhang Xiaolong and Li Jinfeng were confused, asking, Strange phenomenon? What strange phenomenon? Immediately, Zhang Xiaolong's eyes widened, asking loudly, Xiaohua? Father said Xiaohua came back? Xiaohua came back? Where is he? Because of Granny Li's disturbance, Zhang Kai and the others forgot to tell him that Zhang Xiaohua came back. Hearing his big brother's question, Zhang Xiaohua came out from behind Lu Kai, smiling and saying, Big brother, I'm here. Looking at this younger brother who suddenly came out from behind Lu Kai, facing a faint smile. His height is the same as his, and his face is very similar to his own. Zhang Xiaolong's eyes were moist. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. As the saying goes, an elder brother is like a father. It's exactly this kind of feeling. Zhang Xiaolong took a few steps forward, stretching out his long arms, and hugged Zhang Xiaohua tightly in his arms, just like when he hugged him when he was young. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were also a bit hazy. Yes, father and big brother miss me. When father saw me, he only had scruples about his dignity, so he could only hold my hand and look at me carefully. He rarely hugs me in his arms. Big brother is the best. Just like when he brought me up, he didn't hide his feelings. After hugging for a while, Zhang Xiaolong patted his younger brother's back and let him go. He looked up and down again, smiling. Xiaohua has also grown up. You're actually as tall as me. Zhang Xiaohua also smiled and said, Big brother, I'm a little taller than you. Then he walked in front of Li Jinfeng, cupped his hands and said, Young Master Li, I trust you've been well since we last met? Li Jinfeng was even more excited. He quickly saluted and said, I've been well, I've been well, I've been well. I'm indebted to. Before he could finish, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Young Master Li is my first teacher, there's no need to be so polite. Li Jinfeng was also an open-minded person. He smiled and said, Great kindness can't be thanked with words. I'll thank you once today, I won't thank you again in the future. Finished speaking, he deeply saluted. Zhang Xiaohua also quickly returned the salute. Li Jinfeng got up and patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder, he said with a smile. In the past, I was able to touch your head. After not seeing you for a few years, I can only pat your shoulder. AI, time is like water, there's no turning back. Good, good. She didn't know what kind of emotions this guy was feeling. Sad one moment and admiring the next. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Li Jinfeng, who was already a little shorter than her, and sighed in her heart. Back then, they had met by chance in the carriage. She never thought that the situation would be like this today. Meeting by chance could be very strange. At this moment, Li Yinfeng, who had been staring at Zhang Xiaohua, walked up with Lu Kai. When Zhang Xiaohua saw her coming, she quickly waved her hand and said, Big Sister Li, oh, I should call you sister-in-law, but please don't salute me anymore. Uncle Li and Brother Li have already thanked me just now. If you come over and thank me again later, I'll really blush. When Li Yinfeng heard this, her face turned a little red. Just as she was about to speak, Zhang Xiaohua interrupted and said, Moreover, sister-in-law, who asked my character to be so good? The heavens have seen that I've worked hard to save people and have repaid me handsomely. You don't have to be so courteous anymore. Hearing Zhang Xiaohua calling her sister-in-law, Li Yinfeng's face had already turned red. Until Zhang Xiaohua nagged for a long time and stopped when her mouth was dry, she then said, Zhang Xiaohua, I'm not thanking you this time. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. You should have said so earlier. Sigh, you've been too evasive for so long, you've hurt my reputation. Zhang Xiaohua's face was a little hot. Li Yinfeng looked at Lu Kai's expression and asked, Seeing that you're back, I'm finally relieved. But, do you know where Xiaohu is? I heard from Big Brother that the Misty School had been destroyed and the Misty School outside Pingyang City had been taken over by another sect. But why hasn't there been any news from Xiaohu? Is he alive or? She couldn't finish the last word. Xiaohu? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned, but she immediately understood a little. Looking at Lu Kai's awkward expression, she understood everything. She secretly laughed in her heart and also felt a little sad. She could only sigh and said, Sister-in-law, I've also just returned and haven't returned to Ethereal Heights for 4 to 5 years. I really don't know the details of the Misty School. Although I went to Huanxi Heights a few days ago, I didn't get any useful news. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Zhang Kai asked nervously, Xiaohua, why did you go to Huanxi Heights for no reason? Are you looking for trouble? If that sect saw you, do you still want your life? Zhang Xiaohua was also stunned. The Righteous Alliance didn't know that she had killed their disciple. Why would they find trouble with her? But immediately, she understood that her father had misunderstood. She smiled and said, Father, don't worry, I'm also not a disciple of the Misty School. Even if I went to Ethereal Heights openly, no one would recognize me. Moreover, I'm only going to Huanxi Heights and it has nothing to do with the Misty School. I see. Zhang Kai seemed to understand and said, Then you have to be careful and don't run around for no reason. At this moment a trembling and shy voice sounded. That Xiaohua, did you see? Qiu Tong? Zhang Xiaohua looked over in surprise. Of course, Li Jinfeng's pale face was slightly red and he was looking at her with his dry lips. Chapter 376. Li Jinfeng had only seen Qiu Tong once at the Lotus Escort Agency. It had been more than 5 years. Could it be that he still could not forget her? Zhang Xiaohua was really not sure. Was this the legendary love at first sight? Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that young Master Li is still unmarried? However, he wasn't foolish enough to ask in front of his face right now. He only smiled and said, Big Brother is really an infatuated person. However, I don't know if you'll be happy or unhappy to hear this news. Li Jinfeng frowned and said, Xiaohua, regardless of whether Qiu Tong is dead or alive, you have to tell me honestly. I think I am fully prepared. Zhang Xiaohua said, Brother Li, why are you cursing Sister Qiu Tong so much? Look at my smile. Can I tell you the bad news? Then you mean, you saw Miss Qiu Tong at Huanxi Manor? Li Jinfeng was a little ecstatic. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, Big Brother, calm down, calm down. You have to pay attention to your image. I only received news of Sister Chiu Tong at Huanxi Manor. I did not see her. Is that so? Li Jinfeng was obviously a little disappointed. However, his eyes lit up again. He said, "It's good that you have news, it's good that you have news. How is she now? Where is she now?" She. He seemed to have some questions that he was too embarrassed to ask. Zhang Xiaohua said, "Sister Chiu Tong is said to be fine. Her life is not in danger. However, she is not in Pingyang City. I don't know where she is and I don't know the details." I knew it. Li Jinfeng's face lit up. He said, "She is only the manager of Huanxi Manor. She has nothing to do with the Misty School. How could she be in trouble for no reason?" Looking at Li Jinfeng's reaction, old shopkeeper Li, who was standing a little far away, secretly sighed. His eyes turned away, as if he expected better from Li Jinfeng. That's right. Brother Zhang already has a grandson. What about me? He didn't even know where his daughter-in-law was. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have let this brat go to Pingyang City back then. I should have found him a child bride earlier. That was what old Li thought. Li Yinfeng didn't get any definite news about Zhang Xiaohu, so she still looked a little sad. Lu Kai walked up to her and reached out to hold her hand. Li Yinfeng turned her head and saw the concern in Lu Kai's eyes. She held Lu Kai's hand and nodded. Seeing that everyone was done with their questions, Zhang Xiaolong asked another question. "Xiaohua, where have you been all these years? Why didn't you send a message back?" Father and mother were worried to death. They thought you. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "Big brother, it's not that I didn't want to send a message. It's that no one could send a message to me." Zhang Xiaolong was stunned and said, "You were caught and sent to jail?" Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes and said, "Big brother, do I have to go to that extent? It's a long story." Zhang Xiaohua was about to explain when Zhang Kai said, "All right, Xiaohua, let's not talk about it. You must be tired from the journey. Go back to your room and rest. Also Mr. Lu, Brother Li, we can't keep standing in this courtyard. Anyway, the child has been safely born. We're all relieved. Let the women be busy. Let's go back to the room and have some tea." Everyone nodded in agreement. Therefore, other than Zhang Xiaolong and Li Yinfeng who entered the room, everyone else followed Zhang Kai out of the small courtyard and prepared to go back to the original Zhang family's small courtyard. Just as they left the small courtyard, they found that it was unusually lively outside the courtyard door. Why do you think? A group of 7 or 8-year-old children in the Guozhuang house surrounded something that looked very similar to a mule. They were laughing and playing. A few bold ones held a piece of grass in their hands and waved it in front of the mule, trying to lure it. However, the mule just lowered its head and didn't look at them. The grass was even more disdainful. The children didn't see the arrogance in the mule's eyes. They only regretted that their tried and tested method had failed. The timid children stayed far away and only looked at it enviously. Sometimes, they were narrow-minded and even threw 1 or 2 small stones to tease it. In the distance, there were a few idle people in the village who looked at it from time to time. They seemed to have their own plans. Wasn't this mule Zhang Xiaohua's odd beast mount, Huan Huan? This spirit beast really had a good nose. It smelled the entire way and found its way to the door. When he saw the strange thing in front of his door, Zhang Kai was also stunned. He looked at it in a fluster. Mr. Lu was first stunned, then confused. After that, he separated the group of urchins and looked at it from head to toe. He repeatedly exclaimed in surprise, "Could this be the David's David that was written in the book?" He smacked his lips a few times and raised his head to ask, "Whose family's mule is this?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled from behind and said, "Mr. Lu, this is my mount." Seeing this, Mr. Lu slapped his forehead and said with a smile, "I'm going to faint. When I saw this strange thing, I forgot about you. Our Guozhuang house has always had very few people coming. Today, other than you, there shouldn't be any outsiders. Naturally, I thought of you first. That's right. Is this animal an odd beast?" Just as he finished speaking, Huan Huan didn't agree. It hissed and bit Mr. Lu's clothes with its mouth. Mr. Lu was startled. Zhang Xiaohua patted Huan Huan's head and said with a smile, "Mr. Lu, it's an odd beast. I call it Huan Huan. Don't be fooled by its appearance. It's clear in its heart that if you call it Huan Huan, it'll definitely be happy. Mr. Lu was even more surprised. Like a child, he called out in a low voice, Huan Huan, Huan Huan. Huan Huan seemed to understand and hissed again. However, its head was raised high. Mr. Lu clapped his hands in wonder. Xianxia led Huan Huan and followed the crowd back to the Zhang family's small courtyard. She took the long sword from Huan Huan's back and gently placed it by the wall of the small courtyard. Then, she also led Huan Huan to the corner of the courtyard and let it do as it pleased. Xianxia originally wanted to accompany her father. However, she was chased to the side room by Zhang Kai. She said that she was travel-worn and should rest more. However, Xianxia had just broken the innate formation of the round ball and obtained too many things. It was also too inconceivable. He indeed needed to further organize and digest them. Therefore, Xianxia didn't insist. However, before she rested, she still went to the back of the room and stood in front of her grandmother's grave for a long time. She kowtowed a few times before returning to the courtyard. She walked to the room on the left and pushed the door open to enter. At this time, the original location of her grandmother's small room had been demolished and rebuilt. The area was much larger, but the furnishings and layout inside were also the same as before. Seeing this, Xianxia felt extremely peaceful. She floated onto the Kong bed and sat cross-legged, closing her eyes to meditate. In the small room, Xianxia sat there quietly. He was as solemn as a mountain, but his heart wasn't as peaceful as it usually was when he cultivated. To be honest, the birth of his little nephew had shocked him far too much. In the past, when he was still in the Guozhuang house, he felt that knowing martial arts was incomparably powerful. When he learned martial arts and discovered that he cultivated the path of immortality, he felt that the path of immortality was even more admirable. Then, when he reached the 6th layer, he felt that the legendary foundation establishment was incomparably mysterious. However, when he sensed the way of the heavens when he became one with the world, he felt that foundation establishment was nothing more than that. However, in such a short period of time in the eyes of everyone in the small courtyard today, the evolution of the way of the heavens in a single instant or 100 million years in his consciousness had given him a completely new understanding. 100 million years. These weren't just two words. When Xianxia broke free from his consciousness and saw the people in the small courtyard under the sunlight, he felt as if a lifetime had passed. Yes, he was no longer the Xianxia from a moment ago. However, as a 6th layer Qi practitioner, Xianxia really didn't know what exactly was different. It was to the extent that the evolution of the way of the heavens had left a deep impression in his mind. His imprint of the way of the heavens that was as bright as the starry sky already had a past, present, and future, but he still couldn't directly obtain any benefits from it. It was as if he had banknotes worth 10,000 taels of gold, but he couldn't find a bank to exchange them for money. If he had to blame something, he could only blame his cultivation for being too low. As a result, although Xianxia didn't understand the meaning of what he saw, he still carefully engraved it deeply into his memory. He didn't understand it now, but there would be a time when he would understand it. As long as he had banknotes, he wouldn't have to worry about not finding a place to spend them. Secondly, what shocked Xianxia the most was the meridians in his little nephew's body that he saw when he absorbed the dense purple qi. Although Xianxia hadn't cultivated the last 12 layers of the Carefree Heart Sutra, he still remembered all the meridians and cultivation techniques. All these meridians added together were only a drop in the ocean in the body of an infant. At that time, Xianxia had only tried his best to memorize it. Now that he thought about it, a question surfaced in his mind. Is it because the meridians in little nephew's body are different from normal people's? Or is it because all normal people have this many meridians? It's just that no one has discovered it yet? But based on the fact that every layer of the Carefree Heart Sutra could open up new meridians, everyone should have this many meridians. As long as there was a suitable cultivation technique, all the meridians would be opened up. What kind of cultivation level would that be? Furthermore, from Xianxia's memory, those complicated meridians were actually like the circular orbits of the heavenly Tao. No wonder some ancient people said, one person, one world. Could it be that this was the principle? Thinking of this, Xianxia's lips curled into a proud smile. That's right, how could he not smile? Although he didn't know the specific cultivation technique for each meridian, this fellow actually peeked into the secrets of heaven and firmly recorded the countless meridians in his mind. He wouldn't forget it even in this lifetime. As long as he could find the cultivation technique for each meridian, this fellow's immortal path really couldn't be estimated so easily. Then, he took stock of the dense purple qi. This thing could only be sensed and couldn't be measured. It was all sucked into that nameless place on his left arm, so who knew where it went? However, it was fine as long as there was a warm current when he wanted to use it. Presumably, his sister-in-law wouldn't give birth to a baby that would require him to take out his little sword. Xianxia pondered silently in his heart, but he had long forgotten about the bracelet under his left sleeve. A wrist guard was more appropriate. There were faint characters on the surface of the wrist guard. Chapter 377. Although Zhang Xiaohua had gained a lot, he realized that he did not understand the most time-consuming and energy-consuming part of the evolution of the heavenly Tao. His meridians that were as bright as stars did not respond to the cultivation method. He did not know the specific effects of the dense purple qi and did not know where it was hidden in his body. All that was left was the golden light formed by the innate formation. Thinking about the formation, Zhang Xiaohua was excited. Yes, ever since he obtained the immortal fire dragon's jade slip on restriction and formation on the deserted island, he had always been interested in it. During his daily practice, he would always find time to study it. Just now, when his divine sense scanned through one of the talismans, he felt that the essence of the formation was far more profound than what was recorded in the immortal fire dragon's records. With his current cultivation, it was almost impossible for him to understand it. Therefore, when the golden light with half of the dense purple qi shot into the back of his head, he did not panic. This was the same as the meridians and the dense purple qi. As long as it was in his body, there would be a day when he would be able to get it out. And what he wanted to check the most, which was also the most likely to be useful, was the thin layer of golden formation on the essence of herbalism in his Naiwan palace. However, when Zhang Xiaohua was full of anticipation and nervousness as he immersed his divine sense into the essence of herbalism in his Naiwan palace, he almost vomited blood. What do you think? The tiny essence of herbalism was surrounded by a thin layer of golden formation. This formation was made up of 365 golden tadpole-shaped talismans. Each tadpole was connected by a mysterious force. A total of 365 tadpoles were connected together, just like the complete version of the golden formation that he saw previously. It was airtight and difficult to penetrate. When Zhang Xiaohua immersed his divine sense into a single talisman, he did not have time to understand it. A sense of exhaustion surged into his brain, forcing him to withdraw his divine sense. Zhang Xiaohua, who withdrew his divine sense, was depressed for a while. What was this? I gave you a mountain of gold, but I did not give you the power to move it. The most hateful thing was that this mountain of gold was cast into a lump. Even if you wanted to take a piece of it, you would not be able to do so. Under such circumstances, how could Zhang Xiaohua not vomit blood? As it turned out, after being busy for so long, it was all for something that was out of his reach. Draw a picture. Draw a picture. Zhang Xiaohua muttered to herself, looking around in self-pity. However, after calming down for a while, Zhang Xiaohua also felt relieved. The cultivation of the immortal Tao paid the most attention to being down to earth. If one blindly took shortcuts and did not have a solid foundation, one would pay a painful price sooner or later. Take his state of mind as an example. He originally thought that repaying kindness and enmity quickly and killing decisively was a clear path. However, the death of the innocent cat caused him to feel uneasy. If he blindly killed anyone he saw, it was inevitable that he would fall into his own inner demons in the future. Although this kind of tempering was not cultivation, it was better than cultivation. With this roundabout way, the foundation of his state of mind was much more solid. It was the proper way to cultivate the path of immortality. Now that he thought about it, being able to rescue his little nephew from the golden ball was perhaps his greatest gain. Thinking of her cute, chubby little nephew, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but smile. However, who did this kid look like? Why couldn't she tell? After thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua calmed down and started to comprehend Fire Dragon Zhenren's Tao of Arrays. Of course, with a mountain of gold in front of her, she had to train her qi first. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua had been calculating for a long time. Just when she thought that she had gained nothing, she had neglected the part that she had gained the most from. Of course, Zhang Xiaohua did not understand all of this. It was basically playing the lute to a cow. However, as a bystander, watching coldly for hundreds of millions of years was not something that anyone could experience. It was very important for the cultivation of one's Tao heart. From then on, Xianxia's immortal Tao heart was incomparably firm. To a cultivator of the immortal Tao, this was the greatest gain. Furthermore, these hundreds of millions of years seemed to have passed in an instant. It did not leave any marks in her heart. If Xianxia knew about this, he would be laughing in his dreams for the rest of his life. It was a pity that Xianxia was destined to have no dreams. There was only a mysterious twinkle in her eyes. He had no chance to laugh even if he wanted to. Today, Xianxia was no longer a beginner in cultivation. For example, the first time he cultivated beside the farm in the Guozhuang house, he cultivated for 9 days and 9 nights. After he had comprehended the prohibition spell for a while, he opened his eyes and looked out of the window. As expected, the sun was setting. Immortal cultivation had no time. Xianxia was very emotional. This little bit of comprehension would make a day pass. Xianxia walked out of the house and saw a strange scene. The snow in the clean courtyard had been cleared. Everyone was surrounding the corner, and no one noticed her appearance. Looking at the corner, wasn't it where the odd creature Huan was? Xianxia walked over. Li Yinfeng, who was standing outside, heard the footsteps and turned around. When she saw Xianxia, she smiled and said, "Xiaohua, did you sleep well?" "No way, sister-in-law." In the morning, you were still calling Xianxia. In the afternoon, you're acting like a sister-in-law and only call me Xiaohua? Xiaohua's face was filled with righteous indignation. Li Yinfeng blushed and said, "This? Brother Kai said that I don't have to be polite with you. How about I call you benefactor?" At the end of her words, a trace of cunning flashed through Li Yinfeng's eyes. Xianxia waved her hand and said, "Don't, sister-in-law. I'm just joking with you. If you call me Xiaohua, I'll be very happy to hear it. Don't go back to that. By the way, how are my sister-in-law and the child?" Li Yinfeng also smiled and said, "Haha, Xiaohua, I'm just joking too. Xianxia is very good. She seems to have recovered very well. I think she can walk tomorrow. The child is also very good." "Yes, very good." When he entered the room in the morning, he cried and drank milk. After eating, he fell asleep. He might not even wake up now. "Auntie Gua and my mother are over there. You don't have to worry." "Oh, I see. Giving birth to a child is really tiring work. She can't walk for a day." "Yes, from what you said, this is still good. Could it be that her body is so weak that she can't walk for 3 or 4 days? Being a mother is really hard. Poor thing." Li Yinfeng's face turned red again. Xianxia looked and felt very strange. This Miss Li, oh no, this sister-in-law, why is she so shy? When the people at the side saw Xianxia coming over, they all smiled and turned around. When they heard what she said, they all laughed. Only Mr. Lu said, "Xiaohua, where did you get this Davids from?" According to the ancient books, some of the most famous immortals in the ancient times rode on the David's deer. Xianxia shrugged and said, "Mr. Lu, I've only heard about it. My David's deer was given to me by a kid named Xiaohua." "She's also called Xiaohua?" Everyone in the courtyard was interested. Seeing that they were eager to hear the story, Xiaohua said, "Father Mr. Lu, Uncle Li, let's wait for Mother and the others to come and I'll tell them together. This story is quite long. I can't tell it twice, right?" Zhang Kai laughed and said, "You little brat, you're actually keeping your father in suspense. Well, after dinner, we'll light up the lamp and tell you." At this time, Zhang Xiaohua saw that everyone was looking at Huan. In front of the David's deer, there was a huge bathtub full of water. Huan was stretching her neck and drinking. Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly. This David's deer had been in his hands for a long time, but he had never seen it drink like this. When he swept it with his divine sense, he immediately understood. Wasn't this the spring water that his family drank? Could it be that this David's deer actually liked things that were rich in vitality? Oh, no wonder in Songning town, this thing came to me as soon as it saw me. So it was because it smelled vitality. Hee, I thought I had a good character. A shake of my tiger body attracted spiritual beasts to me. Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, "It can only drink water there? If it doesn't eat grass, it will starve to death." After saying this, he suddenly remembered that Nie Qianyu had said that the David's deer liked to eat grass with dew. Thus, he patted Huan Huan's head and poured out the basket of grass. He took away the bathtub with one hand and poured some water on the grass, saying, "Eat the grass, or I won't let you drink the water." The David's deer felt extremely wronged. It hissed on the ground and obediently ate the grass. It looked at Zhang Xiaohua anxiously as she threw the bathtub aside. Zhang Kai looked at his son and said, "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, very well. Father, I haven't slept on the Kong at home for a long time. It really smells good." "That's good. I was afraid that you would be used to it and couldn't sleep when you came back. In the future you can sleep in that room." Zhang Xiaohua frowned. What did father mean? Could it be? Then Zhang Kai said, "Let's go, Xiaohua. Let's invite Mr. Lu and your Uncle Li into the room and look at the mule. Oh, the David's deer has been drinking water for a long time. I'm also thirsty. Let's go in and have tea. You must have walked all the way and are already hungry and thirsty. Drink some water first. Your mother has been serving her grandson all day and left her son aside. Let's go and have a meal." Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, "It's okay, father. When I came back, I had already eaten and drunk in Lu Town. I don't feel hungry now. Let's go in and have tea first. We can cook after mother and the others are done. There's no hurry." Chapter 378. Although Zhang Xiaohua said there was no hurry, how could Zhang Kai bear to let his son, who had just come back from a life-and-death situation, starve? Before she drank a few mouthfuls of tea, Guo Sufei and Li Jinfeng's mother came back from the side. When Auntie Li saw Zhang Xiaohua, she thanked her again. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. She just did a good deed and was thanked 3 or 4 times in a row. Thinking about it, she blushed with shame. Li Yinfeng was sent to the small courtyard next door to take care of the children. The 2 elders were busy in the kitchen. At this time, the Zhang family was no longer the poor Zhang family 5 years ago. Because of the arrival of Lu Kai and his wife and Li Jinfeng's family of 4, the Zhang family had already prepared enough ingredients. Before the sky was completely dark, they had already prepared a table full of sumptuous dishes. The bright central room, the huge table, and the hustle and bustle of the house made Zhang Xiaohua feel a little strange, but she also felt very warm. Time can change a lot, but it can't change family and friendship. The only thing that made Zhang Xiaohua jealous was that her mother only hurriedly put the red braised pork in front of her and watched her eat the biggest piece. Then she wiped the tears in her eyes and went to take care of her little grandson who had just been born. Alas, it seems that the focus of this family has shifted from me to that little guy. Zhang Xiaohua thought in loneliness. Although Li Yinfeng and Auntie Li also had to go next door to take care of the children, they were guests after all. Zhang Kai insisted that they eat here first. Not long after, Zhang Xiaolong also came. Although the central room was big, it was still crowded. Lu Kai said with a smile, "Xiaohua, we originally planned to go to my father's backyard to eat, but in order to welcome you, we have to suffer. Later, you have to drink 2 more cups." Zhang Xiaohua didn't speak. Zhang Kai next to her said, "Xiaohua is still a child. Why drink wine? Lu Kai, you can drink more." Zhang Xiaolong said with a smile, "Dad, our Xiaohua is no longer a child. Don't you see that she is taller than me? Counting her age, she is already 18 years old. She is still in the prime of her youth." Zhang Kai was speechless for a while. Mr. Lu advised, "Old brother Zhang, it's your family's fortune for the child to come back safely after growing up. Don't think too much about it. Tonight, you must have a good time, a good time. Let's have a good time. Let's drink. Anyway, they will leave our protection. Even if you worry, they may not be grateful." Zhang Kai also wiped the corners of his eyes and revealed a smile. The wine was brewed by the Zhang family using spring water and their own crops. There was a slight vitality in drinking it. However, the spiciness was not something that Zhang Xiaohua could handle. After drinking 1 cup, he didn't want to drink anymore. He only took tea to deal with it. Everyone knew that it was his first time drinking wine, so they didn't try to persuade him. After all, Even if Zhang Xiaohua didn't know the quality of the wine, it couldn't be said that everyone present who had drunk wine before didn't know the quality. If Zhang Xiaohua didn't drink, then others could drink more. Lu Kai had drunk it before, so he wasn't surprised. This was the first time the Li family had drunk this kind of wine. Although it didn't have the mellow fragrance of fine wine, it had a unique flavor in the mouth. Even Auntie Li drank a few cups. During the meal, everyone was happy and tipsy. Although Zhang Xiaohua hadn't eaten for a long time, he ate a lot with Zhang Xiaolong. Zhang Xiaolong also kept picking food and meat for him, scolding him for eating so little and being so thin. Zhang Xiaohua didn't explain and ate everything that his elder brother picked for him. Only then did Zhang Xiaolong feel happy. When Auntie Li was almost done eating, she went to replace Guo Sufei and Li Yinfeng. Zhang Xiaohua also quickly got up. The smell of wine was really unpleasant. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaolong also followed. It was said that in many places, pregnant women wouldn't see outsiders for a few days after giving birth. However, Zhang Xiaohua was her husband's brother, whom she hadn't seen for many years. Guozhuang House didn't have too many rules. Moreover, if it wasn't for this little brat, her son might not have been born smoothly. Lu Qian, who was still lying in bed, naturally didn't care about anything. Under the dim light, Lu Qian was stunned when she saw Zhang Xiaohua at first glance. Although Zhang Xiaolong had told her about the changes of Zhang Xiaohua earlier, Lu Qian couldn't help but be surprised when she saw him. Was this still the child who cried in her arms that year? After Zhang Xiaohua bowed deeply, he carefully observed his sister-in-law whom he hadn't seen for many years. Lu Qian didn't change much from 5 years ago. She was slightly plump, and her eyebrows were full of the demeanor of a mature woman. Zhang Xiaohua was a little puzzled. She didn't look weak at all. Seeing Zhang Xiaolong go to the side to take care of the child, Lu Qian smiled and said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, I haven't seen you for a few years. You have grown up. Your elder brother has already told me about what happened today. I didn't expect that after not seeing you for a few years, your skills have improved a lot. I still have to thank you." Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly said, "Sister-in-law, the word thank you is very distant. The child is my little nephew. If I don't do something, who will? Besides, when I went home earlier, I saw that he was just pregnant. Now that I've just returned home, I saw that he was born. This shows that this child and I are destined to be together." Yes. Lu Qian was quite emotional. When she saw that Li Yinfeng and Auntie Li were not paying attention, she whispered, "The small stone you gave me suddenly broke into pieces yesterday and turned into powder. This child was tossing and turning in my stomach and came out today." Zhang Xiaohua said thoughtfully, "I see." At this time, they heard the baby crying on the Kong next to them. Didn't the little guy wake up? Zhang Xiaolong was about to pick him up, but he was pushed aside by Guo Sufei and said, "The child has just been born. His body is still very weak. He can't withstand the rough hands of you men. You stay aside." When Zhang Xiaolong heard this, he just stayed aside and smiled foolishly. "Perhaps he wants to drink milk." "Mother, carry the child over," Lu Qian said softly. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she wanted to leave. However, when she walked past the baby, the white and fat baby's eyes saw Zhang Xiaohua. He stopped crying and stretched out his chubby little hands with difficulty, indicating that he wanted to be carried. Guo Sufei was stunned and said, "Didn't you say that the child can't see anything before 6 months? How can he recognize Xiaohua?" Xiaolong was beside him just now, but he didn't even open his eyes. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the cute little baby, but she turned her body sideways and prepared to leave. Of course, the child's father didn't even let her carry him. Why should she join in the fun? Of course, Guo Sufei had no intention of letting Zhang Xiaohua carry him. She also stopped in her tracks and walked towards Lu Qian. However, the baby refused to accept it. He opened his mouth and cried. Guo Sufei didn't understand. She only thought that the child was hungry and carried him to Lu Qian. Zhang Xiaohua walked to the door and was about to leave when she heard Lu Qian call out, "Xiaohua, wait a moment." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. Sister-in-law was feeding him milk. Why did she ask him to wait? However, when he heard the rustling of clothes, he didn't dare to turn around. However, the baby's cries didn't stop, and he didn't hear the baby drinking milk. After a while he heard Lu Qian say, "Xiaohua, it seems that this child is really fated to be with you. Carry him." "What?" Guo Sufei called out. "Xiaohua hasn't carried a child before. If he falls or gets hurt, it won't be good." "Mother, look at the child. He doesn't drink milk at all. His 2 hands and feet are messing around. That's his obedient appearance from before. It must be because he saw Xiaohua just now." This. Guo Sufei didn't know what to say. Zhang Xiaolong said at the side, "Maybe he wants to smell his father's scent. Come, let father carry him." Sigh, this guy wanted to carry him just now, but he was stopped by his mother. Now, he took the opportunity to enjoy it. Unfortunately, his son didn't give him any face at all. Just as he carried him in his arms, his butt stuck out. Zhang Xiaolong's chest became hot. It was the child's urine. Zhang Xiaohua's face bloomed. Seeing that his son was still crying, Zhang Xiaolong called out, "Xiaohua, come over quickly. Quickly carry your little nephew." Zhang Xiaohua turned around helplessly and stole a glance. Her sister-in-law had already tidied up her clothes. Only then did she walk over slowly. Sure enough, as Zhang Xiaohua walked over, the baby's crying lessened. His round, sparkling eyes looked at her quietly. Zhang Xiaohua was helpless. She stretched out her hands as if she wanted to hold something. Zhang Xiaolong didn't care so much. He reached out and put the child in her hands. Then, he turned around and looked for clothes to change. Zhang Xiaohua's 2 hands, and her whole body, were extremely stiff. She held the baby and didn't dare to move. Yes, her hands were tens of thousands of pounds of strength. If she accidentally touched some parts of the child's body, it would be terrible. The baby was very relaxed in Zhang Xiaohua's arms. His small mouth was open and he laughed, revealing his toothless gums. It was quite cute. Zhang Xiaohua complained in her heart. She usually looked at the baby with a cute smile. Why did it feel so uncomfortable to carry him? She didn't dare to move. It was 100 times worse than fighting with others. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly shouted, "Mother, come and save me. Take him away." But Guo Sufei just smiled and tidied up the diapers on the Kong bed. Lu Qian said, "Since the child likes you so much, you should carry him more. In the future, he will learn martial arts from you. Now you should cultivate your feelings." Zhang Xiaohua wanted to cry but had no tears. But the baby was very happy. His 2 hands made threatening gestures. One of his chubby little hands reached into Zhang Xiaohua's arms as if he had caught something. His laughter became louder. When he took his hand out of her arms, it was the small vitality stone that Zhang Xiaohua used for cultivation. The baby seemed to have gotten the best toy. One of his little hands kept moving, while the thumb of his other little hand reached into his little mouth and sucked on it with relish. At this time, Guo Sufei also finished tidying up the things. Seeing that the baby was no longer crying, she smiled and said, "It seems that he is really fated to be with his uncle. In the future, we don't need to find someone to take care of the baby. Just leave it to Xiaohua." After saying that, she took the baby and handed it to Lu Qian. She said, "Qian, take care of him for a while." Then she said to Aunt Li, "I'll have to trouble sister to take care of him for a while." Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was about to leave again, the baby was unwilling. He took out another hand that was full of saliva from his mouth and reached out to Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua's heart moved. She took out another small vitality stone from her arms and stuffed it into the baby's hand. Sure enough, the baby stopped crying and quietly closed his eyes. He seemed to be asleep. Alas, Zhang Xiaohua sighed in her heart. He was so young, but he had the potential to be greedy. Chapter 379. After the meal, Guo Sufei was not in a hurry to go to Lu Qian. She had not seen her son since he came back in the morning. Of course, she wanted to take this opportunity to see more and ask more questions. The others were also sitting in the chairs, drinking tea leisurely and waiting for the story to start. Yes, the Guozhuang house was not well informed. Even Lu Zhen was not that good. Zhang Xiaohua disappeared for 4 to 5 years. What happened must be unusual. Now that he came back safe and sound, everyone's worries were gone. Naturally, They wanted to know the details. Well, let's just treat it as a story. Gua Sufei was still sitting next to her son. Although Zhang Xiaohua was taller than her, in her eyes, there was not much difference between him and the little grandson in her arms. Seeing that everyone in the living room was serious, Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly. He thought for a while and told them everything that happened after he broke up with his second brother, Zhang Xiaohu. Of course, he still talked about the spring and autumn annals. He ignored the way of the Immortals and only talked about the secret books of the Wulin seniors. However, when he talked about the way back, Zhang Xiaohua hesitated and deliberately skipped the matter of Nie Qianyu. He was afraid that his family would be worried if they heard that there were people from Jianghu chasing after him. In the past 5 years, Zhang Xiaohua had indeed experienced many twists and turns. He had been on the brink of death several times. When she heard that her son had been captured and wanted to be killed, that he had fallen into the sea and was almost eaten by the fishes, and that he had been living alone on a deserted island for 4 years, Gua Sufei's tears had long since fallen. She held her youngest son's hand tightly and refused to let go. She murmured, "Son, poor son. He can only eat sweet potatoes all day. He can't even eat braised pork. Just you wait, son. Mother will make more for you. Don't worry, son. You still have a lot of money from last time. From now on, Mother will make braised pork for you every day and raise you to be as tall and mighty as your brother. Son, from today onwards, you are not allowed to take even half a step out of the Guozhuang house. Mother will watch over you every day." The others had thought that Zhang Xiaohua had only gone missing and that she might not encounter anything life-threatening now that she had returned. Therefore, they listened to the story with an appreciative heart. However, the story was so difficult and far exceeded their expectations. Their expressions became more and more serious until they heard that Zhang Xiaohua had met a child called Xiaohua Ji in Songning town and obtained the David's deer from him. Only then did they relax. They even laughed when they heard that Zhang Xiaohua had exchanged a large sack of copper coins for the David's deer. Gua Sufei blamed her son and said, "Xiaohua, that Xiaohua's family is so poor. Why didn't you leave more money for them?" When Zhang Kai heard this, he scolded, "Woman, your hair is long but your knowledge is short. Didn't you see that Xiaohua didn't even dare to give them money and wanted to exchange it for copper coins for them to spend slowly? You gave them 5 taels of silver and they dared to spend it? Wouldn't they have been remembered by others?" Gua Sufei glared at him and said, "I'm short of knowledge. Humph, my sons are each stronger than the other." Zhang Kai also glared at her and said, "Aren't they my sons?" When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she hurriedly told them about her trip to Huanqi Mountain Villa. The 2 elders immediately became spirited. However, Zhang Xiaohua only said, "We don't know whether second brother is dead or alive. Perhaps he is at the headquarters of the fragrance cult." Alas! The 2 elders sighed at the same time. Perhaps they were still regretting in their hearts. Why did they let their 2 sons walk out of the Guozhuang house that year? As if she knew what her father and mother were thinking, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Everyone has their own path. This is something that others can't interfere with. Since second brother and I have chosen this path, we will walk to the end without any regrets. Doesn't eldest brother also have his own path? Now that he has a child, the child also has his own path. Perhaps his path is different from ours. There are many paths in this world. It only depends on which path you want to take. Perhaps it is your own choice. Perhaps it is God's arrangement. Don't mother and father also have their own paths?" Zhang Xiaohua's words were very profound, but they were easy to understand. Mr. Lu Kai, and Li Jinfeng all showed a surprised expression. However, Zhang Kai, Gua Sufei, and Zhang Xiaolong were thoughtful. Zhang Xiaohua's experience in the past 5 years was very long, and the story was also very long. Looking at the sky, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Mother, let's stop here for tonight. It's already late, and I think I'll fall asleep soon." "Xiaohua, are you still sleeping well? Is it the same even on a deserted island?" Gua Sufei asked with concern. "Yes, Mother. I always go to bed on time." Hee, that's good. Being able to sleep and eat is a good body." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Mother, I am not that. You don't have to describe your handsome son like that." "Ha ha." Gua Sufei covered her mouth and laughed. Her previous gloominess was swept away. Guo Sufei only needed to tidy up a little before letting Zhang Xiaohua go. Young Master Li Jinfeng, insisted on sleeping on the same bed as Zhang Xiaohua so that they could have a long conversation. How could Zhang Xiaohua be willing? She pushed him out and closed the door with a bang. She thought to herself, isn't he just trying to find out more about Qiu Tong? I don't have her here either. He'll definitely bother me tonight. The night passed silently. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua went to the bamboo forest behind the courtyard and practiced the Fist of the North Star. The 18 warm currents tempered her bones 18 times before she stopped. Then, she went to visit her grandmother's grave. When the sky was bright, she returned to the courtyard. Winter was the most relaxing season for farmers. Not to mention, it was only the 10th day of the first lunar month. Although it was already the 5th day, the atmosphere of the new year was still lingering. Early in the morning, Zhang Kai and Mr. Lu sat together and whispered. Yes, the child had already been born yesterday. He looked very healthy and lively. Although Granny Li's words were unpleasant, she made some sense. They understood their family's situation. Lu Qian gave birth after 5 years of pregnancy. Other than Zhang Kai, Guo Sufei, Mr. Lu, Zhang Xiaolong, Zhang Xiaohua, and Lu Qian herself, no one else could know. The Li family saw the child's strange condition when he was born. Lu Kai's family also saw it. If they were told, they would not leak it. Granny Li had already seen the child's different from other babies. Farmers' women were the most unrestrained. The news must have spread last night. The Zhang family could not cover it up, so there was no need to be calculative. But their family's life still had to be lived. The child also had to be raised like other children. Now, the most important thing to be on the agenda should be the child's name. This matter should have been considered yesterday. But didn't Zhang Xiaohua come back? No matter what, they had to show some concern for her, right? Although the focus was on the baby in the future, they also had to give Zhang Xiaohua some time to adapt. Early in the morning, the two grandfathers got together and started to chat while smoking. After breakfast, the sun was shining brightly outside and there was no wind. Zhang Xiaolong moved the table out of the central room and placed a tea set in the small courtyard. As usual, the woman went to Lu Qian's place to take care of the mother and daughter while imparting her parenting experience. Old shopkeeper Li and Li Jinfeng, who were sitting at the table, were surprised when they heard that they were going to name the child today. After all, in their impression, the child should only be given a full name after 1 month. Now they could only give a nickname. However, after Li Jinfeng and the others listened to Mr. Lu's explanation, they realized that every place had its own customs. Lu Town was only a short distance away from the Guozhuang house. In terms of naming the child, there was a lot of difference. Not to mention that the 3 elders were discussing there. Zhang Xiaohua pulled Lu Kai and whispered. Even Zhang Xiaolong, the father, had no right to speak on this matter. How could he, the uncle, say anything? Zhang Xiaohua whispered. Brother Kai, how did you and sister-in-law know each other? You are in Balagu, and sister-in-law is in Lu Town. You are not related at all. When Lu Kai heard this, his face turned red. He opened his mouth, but in the end, he did not say anything. He raised his eyes and looked at Zhang Xiaolong for help. When Zhang Xiaolong saw this, he wanted to ignore it. However, this was his brother-in-law. If he did not want to be kicked out of bed by Lu Qian, he could only extend a friendly hand. Zhang Xiaolong cleared his throat and began to narrate the story of their marriage in detail. Speaking of which, the two were really fated. After Zhang Xiaohua rescued Li Yinfeng, Zhang Xiaohu rode back to Lu Town with the 3 of them. After waiting for Zhang Xiaohua for a long time, they immediately went back to Lu Town and never entered the Li family again. At that time, the Li family was in a panic and forgot to ask for Zhang Xiaohu's address. It was only when Li Jinfeng returned home that he found out about this matter. He personally brought his family to Guozhuang House to thank them. At that time, Zhang Xiaohu had already left home and returned to Pingyang City. There was no news of Zhang Xiaohua's disappearance. Guo Sufei was worried about her son and was sick in bed. Seeing this situation, Li Yinfeng, who came with the intention of marrying Zhang Xiaohua, naturally stayed to take care of Guo Sufei. When Li Yinfeng was disheartened in the forest that day, she was rescued by Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu. She was very grateful to them. When she was rescued again at Shitsue Mountain and returned with Zhang Xiaohu on the same horse, it could be said that they were very close and love was planted in her heart. Oh, that day, she was even more grateful to Zhang Xiaohua. However, wasn't Zhang Xiaohua too young? The story of Li Yinfeng and Zhang Xiaohu was roughly the same as the marriage between Lu Qian and Zhang Xiaohu. If Zhang Xiaohu was at home, Li Yinfeng would probably become Zhang Xiaohua's second sister-in-law. Unfortunately, fate made fools of people. After Zhang Xiaohu left, Li Yinfeng stubbornly stayed in the Zhang family. She was even more stubborn than Lu Qian back then. At that time, Guosufei had already treated Li Yinfeng as her daughter-in-law. Later, when the Misty School was destroyed, Li Jinfeng, who was nearby in Pingyang City, received the news and hurried back to Lu Town. He passed the news to Zhang Kai and Guosufei. Chapter 380. This bad news seemed to have defeated the Zhang family, which had been immersed in the sorrow of Zhang Xiaohua's disappearance. Guosufei lay down again. Fortunately, at this time, Lu Qian's abdomen had slightly bulged. This third generation of the Zhang family was undoubtedly the spiritual pillar of the family at that time, and Li Yinfeng was facing an extremely awkward situation. She was not Zhang Xiaohu's wife, and even Zhang Xiaohu himself did not know. But now in this situation, how could she leave? Moreover, she had lived in the Guozhuang house for a long time, and the people in the Guozhuang house all called her the daughter-in-law of the Zhang family. How could she marry again? Even if she could find a suitable person, how could she explain it to him? And just at this time, her destined son, Lu Kai, appeared. Lu Kai just came to visit the Zhang family with Lu Tufu, and was immediately attracted by the faint sadness between Li Yinfeng's brows. When he heard about Li Yinfeng's situation, he was very sympathetic and begged his sister to find an opportunity to express her magnanimity to the person. Lu Qian received this difficult task, and was very embarrassed. Li Yinfeng was a good girl, pure as ice and jade. She was naturally willing to be her sister-in-law, but after all, she was now using the name of Zhang Xiaolong's second brother's wife. Lu Qian could not tear down her husband's family. She could only discuss with Zhang Xiaolong, and Zhang Xiaolong had no choice but to ask his mother. Guosufei was still sick, but she was not confused. Li Yinfeng had taken care of the Zhang family for a long time, and now there was no news of Zhang Xiaohu. Even if he was alive, they did not know when he would come back. Moreover, they did not know the meaning of Zhang Xiaohu's side, and did not know whether Zhang Xiaohu was willing, so Guosufei also agreed reasonably. But when Li Yinfeng heard this, she did not have any expression. Nonsense, she had stayed in the Zhang family for such a long time. You can change a girl's mind with just a few words. Isn't it inappropriate for others to see it? Fortunately, Mr. Lu had a room in the Guozhuang house. Lu Kai lived there in the name of serving his father. Mr. Lu curled his lips. How could he not know his son's thoughts? Cursing was cursing, and supporting was supporting. Thus, Lu Kai had the advantage of being in a favorable position. Lu Kai was cultured and refined. He was a gentleman who studied and was quite similar to Li Jinfeng. Most women's first impression of their husbands would be based on their fathers and brothers. Lu Kai and Li Yinfeng had similar interests and were indeed more suitable than Zhang Xiaohu. Therefore, after a while, they fell in love with each other. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua laughed loudly, making Lu Kai's face turn red. Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands and said, "Here, I thank Big Brother Kai on behalf of second brother." Lu Kai hurriedly returned the salute and said, "Why is that?" Zhang Xiaohua told him some of the things that happened between Zhang Xiaohu and Chang'e a few years ago and said, "I think I can understand what happened to sister-in-law. Even if my second brother is here, he will have the same idea. We don't expect anything in return for saving people. What's more, she's young Master Li's relative. We can't just stand by and watch. If we make sister-in-law misunderstand us and waste her youth, we don't want to see that. Moreover, you see, my second brother already has a wife. Brother Kai can understand sister-in-law's pain and save her from danger, which is also a great help to my second brother. If I don't thank you, who should I thank?" Hearing this, Lu Kai's face turned red. This was a huge knot in his heart. Now that it was solved by Zhang Xiaohua, how could he not feel relieved? He smiled and cupped his hands again, then ran out of the small courtyard. Alas, in Li Jinfeng's words, that speed was ungentlemanly. Not long after, Lu Kai came back with Li Yinfeng, whose face was red. The two of them saluted Zhang Xiaohua again, making Zhang Xiaohua at a loss. She didn't know what they were up to. Li Yinfeng said shyly, "Xiaohua, if you can see Xiaohu, you have to tell him about my feelings. Lu Kai and I are at home praying that he and Chang'e can get married in the end." Get married in the end? Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly. The Misty School was destroyed. Second brother and Chongjian were nowhere to be found. No one knew if they were dead or alive. It was hard to say if second brother could meet Chongjian and build a relationship with her. However, Zhang Xiaohua still hurriedly returned the salute and said, "I also congratulate you on behalf of second brother. I hope you can live in harmony and have a child soon." Li Yinfeng's face was even redder. While the younger generation was discussing love, the older generation was also concerned. However, love was the most complicated thing. If they interfered a little, there might be a lot of twists and turns. Zhang Kai also didn't understand Zhang Xiaohu's thoughts, so he didn't dare to interrupt. It was only when he heard Zhang Xiaohua say that his son already had someone he liked outside that he became both sad and happy. He was worried about his missing son. Now that they were talking, the atmosphere became more lively. The three old people's thoughts were basically the same. Zhang Kai shouted, "Xiaolong, go and call your mother over." "Also the child?" Mr. Lu hurriedly stopped him and said, "It's better to let the in-laws come over. The child caught a cold outside yesterday. Today, before the full moon, it's better not to go out." Zhang Kai smiled and said, "Okay, then Xiaolong, call your mother over." After a while, Guo Sufei came back with a smile on her face. Although there was still no news of her second son, Zhang Xiaohu, the return of her missing youngest son and the birth of her long-awaited grandson gave her great comfort. Moreover, this little grandson was smarter than the other children in the village. How could Guo Sufei not be happy? Today was the day that his precious grandson would be named. For farmers, names were the first step into this world. The quality of a name directly determined the child's life. Thinking back to the names his father had given his three children, they were so wonderful. Little Dragon, Little Tiger, and Little Flower. Looking at his family situation now, it was something that he had never dreamed of before. It was all thanks to his father's foresight that he had found such good names that reflected the spirit of a dragon horse. Waiting for Guo Sufei to sit down, Zhang Kai fiddled with his goatee, tapped his pipe and said, "Brother Lu, why don't you say it? You are a knowledgeable person. Your sister-in-law trusts you very much." Mr. Lu waved his hand and said, "Brother Zhang, don't laugh at me. This is the right of a brother. Others can't take it away." Guo Sufei also said, "Father of the child, hurry up and say it. If it doesn't work, we can ask the in-laws to change it." Zhang Kai narrowed his eyes and said, "The name I gave the child is called..." Zhang Kai deliberately dragged out his voice, "Zhang Jian." Jian, it means solid. It means that the child is as strong as a rock. In the future, he will also grow strong. Mr. Lu added, "The child must also have a strong will and grow strong like a towering tree." Good. Everyone applauded. The older the ginger, the spicier it is. The word strong reflected everyone's thoughts. Guo Sufei was also happy. She immediately wanted to stand up and tell Lu Qian the good news. However, Mr. Lu said, "Sister-in-law, don't be anxious." Guo Sufei was stunned and said, "Is there anything else? Since it's a name, why don't we name it together today?" "There's a name." Guo Sufei was stunned. Zhang Kai, Zhang Xiaolong, and Zhang Xiaohua were also stunned. Only Lu Kai and Li Jinfeng smiled and said, "Mr. Lu really loves the house and its crow. Zhang Jian has just been born and you want to give him a courtesy name?" Mr. Lu smiled and said, "That's right. Since it's already been named, then it's better to give it to him. Later, sister-in-law, you still have to think of a nickname for the child." Courtesy name? Zhang Xiaolong and Zhang Xiaohua looked at each other. After Li Jinfeng's explanation, the two of them finally understood. It turned out that the literati in the big cities, in addition to their original names, would be specially bestowed with a courtesy name by their family elders when they reached adulthood. It was a symbol of status. Lu Kai and Li Jinfeng did not have a courtesy name. Therefore, Mr. Lu giving Zhang Jian a courtesy name was a little ahead of schedule. However, this courtesy name was to be used after he came of age. It was understandable for the elders to give him a name now. After all, outsiders would not know. Old Li smiled and said, "Mr. Lu is keeping it a secret. Why didn't you say so earlier? Please tell us, Mr. Lu, so that we can consider it together." Mr. Lu took a sip of tea and said with a smile, "I thought about it for a long time last night. I feel that Jianghu was born with a vision. In the future, he will not be an ordinary person. Outstanding people are all proud and aloof. This is not good for life. Therefore, I want to give Jianghu a courtesy name. He will treat others kindly and treat others as his friends. This kind of person will be able to achieve great things. What do you think?" Zhang Yuyu, Li Jinfeng and Lu Kai thought for a while and both of them agreed. The name Zhang Jian could be heard from the Zhang family, but as for this Zhang Yuyu, to be honest, Zhang Kai and Guo Sufei really couldn't tell what it was. However, since the courtesy name was something of a scholar, it was naturally better for the scholar to say it. Zhang Kai and Guo Sufei also agreed. However, when it came to Guo Sufei's turn to come up with a nickname for the child, she frowned. After a long time she said, "In-law, what do you think of Goshing, Erden, Dumbo, and Gubuli?" Mr. Lu's expression changed and he said with a smile, "Sister-in-law, since you already have a genteel courtesy name, it is not good to use a peasant's nickname. Think about it again." Guo Sufei thought for a long time and said, "Forget it. Let's give it to you. Why don't I ask Xianxia and see what she thinks?" At this time, Xianxia, who had been silent all this time, said, "Father, Mother, Mr. Lu, I have a nickname. Listen and see if it is okay." Zhang Kai was about to scold her when Mr. Lu smiled and said, "It's okay. You say it. Xiaohua, now that you have been outside for several years, you have a lot of experience. This nickname may not be bad. If it is not okay, then let Qianqian decide." Zhang Xiaohua thought for a while and said, "Let's give Jian a nickname, Byron. What do you think?" Chapter 381. Byron. Guo Sufei was not the only one who was surprised. Everyone present frowned. Yes, it was understandable that Guo Sufei had nicknamed Jianqin, Goshing, or Dumbo. That was what farmers called him. But Byron was not even close to a nickname. It was not as good as Yao Yao or Huan Huan. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, "Mr. Lu has just said that Jian will be an extraordinary person in the future. But now, this news has been known by Granny Li. Maybe tomorrow, the rumor will spread to the Guozhuang house." Of course, what she saw was just the tip of the iceberg. What we know is the whole truth. Speaking of this, Zhang Xiaohua stood up and bowed deeply to Old Li's family and Lu Kai's family. These people were even more surprised. The younger ones hurriedly returned the bow and asked, "Xiaohua, what do you mean?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Granny Li only saw Jian grow up, but everyone saw Jian come out of the lotus. If this news were to spread, it would be a disaster for Jian. Who knows, it might attract the covetous eyes of some people. I beg everyone here, for the sake of Jian's growth, please don't tell anyone what you saw yesterday to outsiders. No one is allowed to do so." Zhang Xiaohua said sincerely and looked serious. Everyone was shocked. Although Zhang Xiaohua did not say anything threatening, from his eyes, they did not doubt that if something was leaked, he might not be lenient because of his family relationship with them. In particular, yesterday, Zhang Xiaohua split the lotus with his small sword and carried Zhang Jian out of the lotus. He was already regarded as an extraordinary person. Moreover, as early as 5 years ago, he could safely rescue 3 people from the mountain bandits in Shizue Mountain. 5 years after obtaining the secret martial arts book, it was easy to imagine how high his martial arts skills were. Therefore, the two families agreed with Zhang Xiaohua's proposal from the bottom of their hearts. After all, wasn't Zhang Jian their relative? Why should they make things difficult for their own people? Seeing that everyone had solemnly agreed, Zhang Xiaohua continued, "But even Granny Li's rumors will definitely affect Jian. Jian will definitely be bullied or encouraged by other children as he grows up. However, according to my observation, the possibility of Jian being at a disadvantage is not high. However, it is precisely because of this that Jian has to restrain himself and keep a low profile. As the saying goes, the rafters that stick out first rot. I hope that our Jian will keep a low profile. Only by enduring what ordinary people can't endure can he accomplish what ordinary people can't. Mr. Liu, do you think what I said makes sense? Clap, clap, clap. Mr. Liu excitedly clapped his hands and said, Xiaohua's words make a lot of sense. This is also what I wanted to say. But I didn't expect Xiaohua to see it so clearly. Good, it's better to travel 10,000 miles than to read 10,000 books. It's really not wrong. Xianxia was very modest and said, Mr. Liu is too polite. This little one has seen too many such precedents in the Jianghu. That's why this little one spoke out. It's just that this little one has seen too many such precedents in the Jianghu. Mr. Liu smiled and said, Xiaohua, you don't have to be so polite. You don't have to be modest. That year when you followed Xiaolong to Bali village to fetch the bride, I could see that you were extraordinary. Now it seems that my eyesight was really not wrong. Oh right. Do you still remember the bow you pulled in front of my house? Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, Of course I remember. That was the first time I pulled the bow and shot an arrow. How could I forget? Mr. Liu said, That bow is very famous. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said, I don't know about this. Please teach me, Mr. Liu. Mr. Liu said, That year when I knew that your big brother's arm was injured, I specially got someone to borrow a soft bow from the village's hunter. But it was just for the occasion. Those 3 arrows were easily shot away by you. At that time, no one paid attention to it. They also knew some of my arrangements. But after a few days, the hunter came back from hunting outside the mountains and apologized to me, saying that he had spoiled my happy occasion. This made me very surprised. Only then did I know that he had taken the wrong bow. Not only was it not a soft bow, but it was the hunter's ancestral 5-pickle strong bow. He had not pulled it out for many years. Xiaohua, that's right. I knew that you were not a person of the small pond. So when you wanted to go to Pingyang City to see the world, I was also very supportive of it. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, So it's like this. I was saying that after shooting 3 arrows with that bow, all the strength in my body was gone. That's the secret. At this time, Li Jinfeng asked, Xiaohua, at that time you were only 11 or 12 years old, but your strength was already extraordinary. All right, I think I heard you say that you lifted a 500 gene stone weight at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, When did I tell you that? I don't remember. Li Jinfeng scratched his head and said, Maybe it was Shangguan Yun, maybe it was Yu Luan. After a long time I have long forgotten. That's because I only wanted to enter that Lotus Flower Escort Agency. Who would still remember how heavy the stone weight was? It was also 500 gene. Li Jinfeng was not satisfied and said, That was 5 or 6 years ago. You have practiced martial arts for such a long time. How much strength do you have now? Is it 1,000 gene? Zhang Xiaohua was about to shake his head and deny it, but when he saw his mother and father's proud eyes, and old manager Li's surprised gaze, he immediately denied his previous thoughts. He knew that although old manager Li was grateful and would not reveal Jenner's abnormality, he was after all an outsider. He still did not dare to believe it. Listening to his mother and father's words, they wanted him to stay in the Guozhuang house from now on and never leave. But even if he would be free, what about his second brother, Zhang Xiaohu? If he really needed to save him, then wouldn't he have lost the opportunity? Therefore, taking this opportunity to establish his prestige, and let the elders see his strength was not necessarily a bad thing. This was killing 2 birds with 1 stone, and Zhang Xiaohua liked to do it. 1,000 gene? Zhang Xiaohua said loudly, It's still a bit light. What? Not only was Li Jinfeng surprised, but Zhang Xiaolong and Lu Kai also had their mouths wide open. Is it 1,500 gene? Lu Kai gave a number. Zhang Xiaohua shook his head. 2,000 gene? Li Yinfeng also said in surprise. Zhang Xiaohua still shook his head. Xiaohua, don't scare us. Is it 3,000 gene? Zhang Xiaolong finally could not help but say an unbelievable number. Yes, what kind of concept was 3,000 gene? They themselves did not know. They only knew that 5 jin of pork was very heavy. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua still shaking his head, the 3 elders could not take it anymore and asked, 5,000 jin? 8,000 jin? 10,000 jin? When Zhang Kai said the last word, he already had a smile on his face. It was not a smile of pride, but a smile of ridicule. In his opinion, his son was probably joking. Seeing that everyone was looking at him with a smile, Zhang Xiaohua also smiled. His strength was not easy to describe purely from numbers. He thought for a moment, turned his head and looked at the long sword in the corner. He got up and took it, gently putting it on the ground and said, "This is my weapon. You will know my strength when you try it." Li Jinfeng's eyes were sharp. He laughed and said, "Isn't this what the 4 odd beasts were carrying yesterday? Animals can carry it, so its weight must be limited. 100 jin should be enough. This is not commensurate with your strength." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and did not speak. Li Jinfeng did not go up himself. He knew his own weight, so he looked at Zhang Xiaolong to test his strength. Zhang Xiaolong felt funny. Xiaohua was obviously joking. How could this stone-like thing be a weapon? Even if it was heavy, it was only a few dozen jin. He could definitely carry it. Zhang Xiaolong got up and walked to the sword. He bent down and grabbed the hilt with one hand. He exerted his strength, but it did not move at all. Zhang Xiaolong frowned and then grabbed both sides of the sword with both hands. He exerted his strength at the same time, but it still did not move at all. Zhang Xiaolong got up, clapped his hands and laughed. "Oh, it is really heavy. I used all my strength, but I can't move it at all. Xiaohua, you are really powerful." This time, everyone knew that the 2 brothers were acting. Lu Kai also laughed and said, "Xiaohua is so powerful. I also want to try." Lu Kai also did the same as Zhang Xiaolong. He did not move at all. He got up and praised Zhang Xiaohua with a smile. Li Jinfeng could not sit still anymore. He also did the same. Then with a strange expression, he also praised without restraint like the previous 2. Now, even Li Yinfeng could not sit still anymore. She wanted to go up and try. Guo Sufei advised, "Yinfeng, don't learn from them. They are all playing with you. Can't you see?" Zhang Kai also laughed and said, "Yes, Yinfeng. Sit here. If you don't go up, you see who else they are going to trick? Anyway, I am not going up to try." Ha ha. Mr. Liu and old manager Li also laughed. At the same time they said, "We have eaten more salt than you have rice. Can't we see what you are up to?" After the 3 of them finished laughing, the younger generation also laughed. They really did not expect that the old men's hearts were not old. They actually played this trick on them. Li Jinfeng laughed until tears were coming out of his eyes. He said breathlessly, "Little sister, father, we really can't move at all." What? This time, it was the 4 old men's turn to look at each other. So it was not a joke. Zhang Kai couldn't sit still any longer. That was because Mr. Liu was a frail scholar, and old manager Li often used an abacus. Only he still had some strength, especially after drinking spring water for so many years. He still felt very good about himself. Zhang Kai walked to the side of the long sword and carefully sized it up. He directly used both hands to hold it. He did not dare to use the strength of his whole body. If it was really not heavy, wouldn't he fall down? Let the younger generation laugh at him? Zhang Kai used 20% of his strength. That stone stick did not move an inch. Zhang Kai used 50% of his strength. That stone stick still did not move. Until the end, Zhang Kai used all his strength. That stone stick still did not move. Chapter 382. Zhang Kai clapped his hands. Just like Li Jinfeng, he smiled and said, "Xiaohua, you are really naughty. You want us to carry such a heavy thing. Who can lift it?" Looking at Zhang Kai's appearance, if Mr. Liu and old shopkeeper Li didn't know Zhang Kai very well, they might have thought that he was lying to them. Guo Sufei asked doubtfully, "Xiaohua, how heavy is this small thing? No one can lift it at all." Zhang Xiaohua walked in front and picked it up with one hand. She waved it lightly and said, Mother, to be honest, I don't know how heavy it is. After all, I haven't seen such a heavy thing. Oh. Everyone suddenly understood. What she said was true. Who had nothing better to do? What's the use of weighing so many things? Seeing this, Zhang Xiaolong's eyes lit up and said, Xiaohua, it's great that you're back. You're so strong. In the future, we won't need cows to plow the fields anymore. Bang! Zhang Xiaohua fell to the ground. After a while she got up and said, Big brother, you can't do this. You can't let me do anything. Plow the fields for cows. You're wasting resources. Then go help people dig wells. Your strength is equivalent to 10 people. Zhang Xiaolong was very economical. After everyone chatted for a while, Guo Sufei and Li Yinfeng went to the small courtyard next door and told Lu Qian the names of the 3 babies. Lu Qian was very happy when she heard it. Needless to say, the names and courtesy names were carefully chosen by the elders. She had some experience with Zhang Xiaohua's miracle. Everyone knew that she was pregnant for 10 months, but she was pregnant for 5 years before she gave birth. Zhang Xiaohua already knew about this situation 5 years ago. Moreover, Zhang Xiaohua even gave her a small stone. When the stone turned into powder, her son was born. Could it be explained with the word coincidence? Today, Zhang Xiaohua actually gave her son a pet name. It was exactly what she wanted. The name, Byron, was really extraordinary. How could Lu Qian not be happy? She picked up her son who was sleeping soundly next to her. Zhang Jian, Zhang Yuyu, and Zhang Byron called him one by one. Hearing this, the child opened his eyes in a daze and babbled nonsense. Li Jinfeng's family of 3 went to Guozhuang House to pay a New Year's greeting to the Zhang family because of the new year. Lu Kai and his wife came together because Li Yinfeng went back to her parents' home. Anyway, they had to come. As soon as the 2 groups of people arrived at Guozhuang House, they encountered Lu Qian giving birth, so they stayed to help. Now the child was born smoothly and the New Year's greeting was over. Li Jinfeng's family of 3 naturally had to go back to Lu Town. However, Zhang Kai was happy and said, Brother, if you're not busy with the affairs in town, you can go back later. It won't be too late to leave after the 15th day of the first lunar month. Anyway, Guozhuang House has a place to stay. Shopkeeper Li's business in Lu Town had been doing well in recent years. He thought that there would be nothing to do during the new year. So, after a little hesitation, he agreed to Zhang Kai's suggestion. In fact, if Zhang Xiaohua didn't come back, Shopkeeper Li might not have hesitated. She had just given birth and was very busy. Wouldn't it be troublesome if his family stayed here? Although he didn't know exactly what kind of person Zhang Xiaohua was now, 5 years ago, she could go into the tiger's den and come out unscathed. 5 years later, Zhang Xiaohua must be even more incredible. Mr. Lu and Zhang Kai didn't hang around in Lu Town, so they didn't have much impression of the outside world. Shopkeeper Li knew what kind of person Zhang Xiaohua would be if she was in Lu Town. Moreover, according to Zhang Kai and Guo Sufei's meaning, his youngest son wouldn't be allowed to travel far in the future. Since he couldn't travel far, where could he go? He couldn't really farm in the Guozhuang House, so Zhang Xiaohua's only choice was Lu Town. Therefore, Shopkeeper Li's little abacus was very clear. As long as he had a good relationship with Zhang Xiaohua, his family should be able to do whatever they wanted in Lu Town in the future. Therefore, Zhang Kai's politeness at this time was like handing a pillow to a thirsty person. Shopkeeper Li hesitated for a moment and immediately accepted it. Lu Kai and Li Yinfeng didn't need to be mentioned. They directly lived in Mr. Lu's house. On one hand, they served their father, and on the other hand, they took care of their sister. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, it was the 15th day of the first lunar month. In the past few days, Zhang Xiaohua didn't go anywhere. She just wandered around the Guozhuang House, paying New Year's greetings here and sending gifts there. It was true that this farmer's house was simple, but it wasn't necessarily pure. In the past, Guo Sufei was the only girl in the Guozhuang House, and she was bullied both openly and secretly. Zhang Kai married into the family and gave birth to 3 fat boys. In the eyes of the farmers, they were 3 strong men. Therefore, there were fewer bullies. However, just when the family's life was getting better, Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu disappeared. At first, people thought that they had gone to other places to live and maybe they would be successful in the future. Well, when Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu came back for the first time, people in the Guozhuang house envied them for a while. Many people had never seen such a tall red horse before. However, the two left in a hurry and didn't come back for many years. Therefore, many rumors spread. Li Yinfeng's arrival indirectly made the idlers in the Guozhuang house a little apprehensive. But later, Li Yinfeng married Lu Kai. Although the Zhang family kept their mouths shut, this fact couldn't be covered up. In addition, Guo Sufei fell ill twice. How could the people in the Guozhuang house not know that something had happened to the Zhang family? In addition, Zhang Xiaohu and Zhang Xiaohua had brought home 3,000 to 4,000 taels of silver. Although they did not spend extravagantly, it was still needed to improve their lives. The original small courtyard was renovated, and a new courtyard was built next to it. The idle men in the village were jealous, and rumors began to spread. Some said that the money was exchanged with the lives of the two sons, some said that the two sons had committed robbery, and some said that the rumors were unpleasant to hear. Fortunately, the Zhang family had always had a good reputation in the village, and many people leaned towards the former. The eyes of the people were really sharp. This rumor was really infinitely close to the truth. The Zhang family couldn't deny it. In fact, there was nothing to explain. In particular, due to Granny Li's adding fuel to the fire, there were already some rumors about Zhang Jian's birth. Although Zhang Xiaohua was just 18 years old, he had licked the blood of blades in the Jianghu. He had a good understanding of the human heart. The evolution of the way of heaven had given him endless training, and he had already clearly seen the undercurrents behind the simple farmers. Therefore, during this period of time, he had spent a lot of time hanging out with the idlers in the Guozhuang house. From time to time, he would show off his Jianghu experience, talk about the bloodshed of revenge, and when he was full of enthusiasm, he would pick up a stone or millstone with one hand to show off his strength. Even some young men who had learned a thing or two came forward to show off a few times. But Zhang Xiaohua didn't hesitate to send them flying with a kick. At most, there were about a dozen of them, and they all surrounded and attacked Zhang Xiaohua as if they were joking. Zhang Xiaohua didn't hold back at all. He didn't even use his hands, and with less than a minute of kung fu, he knocked them down one by one. This time, the crowd closed their mouths, and there was only fear and admiration in their eyes. Zhang Xiaohua was very satisfied with this result. He clapped his hands and left. Zhang Xiaohua went to Zhang Jian's place every day. He didn't tell anyone about Zhang Jian's extraordinariness, including Lu Qian. However, in these few days, he didn't see any special differences between him and other children. For example, he could talk and walk when he was born. Instead, he went to sleep every day after drinking milk. He didn't look like he was worrying at all. Yes, he didn't look like he was sleeping soundly while clutching the two ugly little stones. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua was slightly relieved. There was no one in the family who was particularly strong. If Zhang Jian stood out too much, it was inevitable that there would be trouble. Keeping a low profile was the way to go. As for his little nephew's future, Zhang Xiaohua wasn't worried at all. What a joke. The omen was so strong. If he didn't have a bright future, it must be God who was blind. On the 15th day of the first lunar month, old shopkeeper Li and his family decided to go back to Lu town. In these few days, old shopkeeper Li tried to persuade Li Jinfeng to hang out more with Zhang Xiaohua. However, Li Jinfeng didn't care. Zhang Xiaohua was indeed powerful, but wasn't he his student who initiated him? Old shopkeeper Li opened his heart to him and became friends with him. There was really no need to flatter him deliberately. Li Jinfeng originally wanted to get information about Qiu Tong from Zhang Xiaohua. Now, Li Jinfeng would rather not ask than look for Zhang Xiaohua. This surprised Zhang Xiaohua for a while. On the 15th day of the first lunar month, Lu town had festive lanterns. Guozhuang house also had this custom. However, it wasn't as lively as Lu town. Old shopkeeper Li naturally invited the Zhang family to Lu town to take a look. After giving birth, Lu Qian recovered very well. She could walk a few days ago. She didn't look as weak as Zhang Xiaohua imagined. However, she couldn't leave the courtyard until she was 1 month old. Guo Sufei and Zhang Xiaolong had to stay at home to take care of Xiao Jian. Only Zhang Kai and Zhang Xiaohua were left in the Zhang family. Zhang Kai didn't want to go. However, when he thought that Xiaohua had been hanging out with the young people in the village for the past few days, He thought that he couldn't bear the loneliness. Therefore, he wanted to bring him to Lu Town to take a look. Since he was willing to go, Xianxia naturally accompanied him. Mr. Lu's family was a leisurely trio. They could leave at any time. Therefore, the group of people came to Lu Town. The last time they came to Lu Town was 5 years ago. The Li family was in ruins, but it had been rebuilt. It was not inferior to before. Old shopkeeper Li held a banquet at home to entertain the Zhang and Lu families. When shopkeeper Yu of the Jade Shop heard the news, he prepared gifts early and brought his daughter and son-in-law to thank them. Fortunately, the Li family was now well off. The central room was very spacious, so it could accommodate so many people. The banquet was very enjoyable until night fell. Before the sky turned dark, the sound of gongs and drums could be heard outside. Firecrackers and the like were also going off non-stop. Although Four Trees was not the most prosperous place in Lu Town, it was still a hubbub of voices and unusually lively. Chapter 383. Guozhuang House and Balagu were both in the countryside. Ever since Li Yinfeng married into Balagu, she had not seen such a lively 15th day of the first lunar month for several years. When she heard the sound of gongs and drums on the street, she could not sit still. It seemed that she was even more anxious to go out than Zhang Xiaohua. On the contrary, the 18-year-old Zhang Xiaohua was very well behaved and sat down with a smile. Nonsense. His divine sense had already been sent out. Of course, he did not need to be so anxious. But he sat so steadily that it unconsciously made everyone present think highly of him. Of course, look at this child. He really seemed to have lived in a big town. This calmness was not something that ordinary people could compare with. Seeing that it was almost time, everyone was full. Old shopkeeper Li got up and, together with shopkeeper Yu, led everyone to the street. They followed the flow of people and admired the lanterns on both sides of the street. The 15th day of the first lunar month was the day of the full moon. High in the sky, a bright moon hung there. Many shops on both sides of the street hung up homemade lanterns. There were also hawkers who set up stalls to sell lanterns. In the flow of people, there were old and young. All of them had lanterns in their hands. They walked and looked and chatted. Not long after Zhang Xiaohua and the others left the Li family, they came across a stall selling lanterns. Shopkeeper Yu waved his hand and everyone bought one. Even Zhang Kai accepted it gladly. He carried a medium-sized lantern in his hand. Zhang Xiaohua was very surprised when she saw this. In her impression, her father was a somewhat old-fashioned person. She had never seen him carry such things for children. But then she saw old shopkeeper Yu and old shopkeeper Li also carrying a lantern with a smile. She laughed in her heart. It turns out that there is innocence in everyone's heart. There were many people on the street, but they were also divided into groups. Li Jinfeng, Lu Kai, and the son-in-law of the Yu family, Zhang Xiaohua, walked together. Li Jinfeng knew that Zhang Xiaohua was unfamiliar with these things, so he pointed here and there and introduced them to him in detail. Li Yinfeng and Yu Biha were together, holding exquisite lanterns in their hands. It was unknown what they were whispering to each other, but they were also covering their mouths and laughing. The four old people walked at the back. They were a little slow, but they were also chatting happily and nodding their heads frequently. After walking through a few streets, the flow of people increased. It was as if they had been cooped up at home for an entire year and only came out now to get some fresh air. In front of them, the sound of gongs and drums could be heard. Waves of cheers could be heard. Li Jinfeng explained with a smile. In front of us is a big square in the west of the city. Most of the temple fairs during the new year are held here. Presumably, there is a lion and dragon dance performance now, which is why it attracted so many cheers. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he couldn't help but feel a little strange. He had an affinity with this square in Lu Town. The first time he saw Lu Qian being molested in the square with his father and two brothers, he stood up for justice and helped Zhang Xiaolong win the beauty. 5 years ago, he and his second brother came across a Jianghu man who was selling medicine in the square and was bullied. He also stood up for justice and got something similar to a pill formula. He also broke one of the bully's legs. He didn't know what strange things he would encounter today. Unfortunately, when he turned the corner of the street, he saw a group of bright lights and a lively scene in front of him. Everyone's face was filled with a happy smile. There was nothing unusual about it. In the middle of the square, 2 dragon dance teams were holding wooden poles. Each of them danced with 2 long dragon-shaped lanterns. They were having a hearty battle. When Xianxia saw the dragon shape, she couldn't help but feel moved. On the 9th day of the first month, the dragon shape formed by the heaven and earth essence chi that she saw in her divine sense was similar to this dragon lantern. Presumably, this dragon-shaped essence chi didn't appear just now. It was estimated that 10,000 years ago, when the immortal Tao was at its peak, it also appeared from time to time. This was why the immortal cultivators saw it. He didn't know how it spread to the mortal world. But why wasn't there a phoenix lantern? However, immediately Xianxia had an answer. Dragon dance. Wasn't it because of the dragon's long body that everyone felt lively when they cooperated? If it was a phoenix dance, only one person would take it. How would it be fun to dance? Moreover, the dragon's head was difficult to tie. If it was a phoenix, the whole body was difficult to tie. It was also inconvenient to do it. It should be so. Ha! Xianxia was quite proud of her cleverness. Around the dragon dance team, there were more than 10 lion dance teams. They were all sweating profusely. Not only Xianxia was happy to see this, but the others also kept applauding. Xianxia was also pitiful. Before he went to Pingyang City, he was 12 years old. During these 12 years, he only had the opportunity to come to Lu Town during the New Year, and it was always during the day. He had never experienced the scenery of Lu Town at night. He used to think that the people in Lu Town were like the Guozhuang house, who would turn off the lights and go to sleep when the sky turned dark. Even on the 15th and 16th of the first month, he just took Xiaohua's lantern for a stroll in the village. Until today, he realized that the nightlife of the people in this town was really rich and colorful. After a while, the number of people in the square gradually increased. Xianxia and the others were slowly squeezed to a corner of the square. However, even if they were not in the center, it was still lively here. Just as they were enjoying the show, a woman suddenly stumbled out from an alley next to the square. She cried and shouted, my child's father, where are you? My child has been snatched away." She shouted and searched all the way. At this moment, a person blocked her and shouted, "Wunyang, what happened to your Zizi?" Wunyang cried and shouted, "Second uncle, just now, Zizi and I were making lanterns in the courtyard." Suddenly, a masked black shadow fell from the sky, grabbed Zizi, and then jumped onto the roof and disappeared. "Tell me, how can I live like this?" The person pointed in a direction and said, "I think I saw Brother Lu over there just now. You go and look for him." Sigh. Wunyang grabbed his hand as if she was asking for help. She had long forgotten her scruples and said, "Second uncle, can I trouble you to go to the government and ask them to send someone over?" The person said firmly, "Don't worry, Wunyang, I'll go now. However, you have to be mentally prepared. During the new year, the government is the most lax. Moreover, according to what you said, that person is a high-ranking person. How would the government dare to interfere?" Wunyang cried even more miserably and said, Then, I really can't live anymore." After saying that, she stumbled in that direction again. The person called second uncle also sighed and said, "This world." He touched his money pouch, separated the crowd, and went straight to the government. At this moment, a familiar person next to him said, "Sigh, poor Zizi. I just saw her at the corner of the street this morning. She's a very cute little girl." The person next to him also said in surprise, "Don't you think it's strange? Why would someone be interested in a girl from an ordinary family? If he wants to kidnap someone, he should kidnap a beauty, right?" "Yes," second aunt said that it's obviously a master in the martial arts world. "Wouldn't it be better if he came at night? Why did he have to kidnap her now? What time is it now?" Another person said, "Don't underestimate this girl. When I met her this morning, second aunt was taking her for a divination. The blind fortune teller said that this girl's ghost fate is on the 7th day of the 7th month. It's the most gloomy. If she can be used properly and find a good husband, she will bring good fortune to her husband's family." Tesvese. Could it be that the martial arts master in the martial arts world eavesdropped on it and was itching to kidnap her before the sky turned dark? "Cripple, you're just talking nonsense. Zizi is just a 7-year-old child. Hee hee, I'm just saying. Maybe the martial arts master is interested in this? These words were getting more and more unpleasant. Sigh. Zhang Xiaohua sighed. Human nature was really unpredictable. He turned to the side and saw several pairs of eyes staring at him. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She reached out and rubbed her face left and right. Puzzled, she said, "Father, there's no dust on my face, right?" Zhang Kai said, "No. Even if there is, it's so dark. How can I see?" "Then why are you looking at me?" Zhang Xiaohua was very puzzled. Zhang Kai frowned. He looked around and whispered, "Xiaohua, didn't you hear about what happened to Zizi just now? Don't you have anything to say?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Of course, I have extreme sympathy. If her mother was born a few hours later, perhaps there wouldn't be such a tragedy." Zhang Kai pointed at Zhang Xiaohua angrily. He didn't know what to say. He lowered his voice and said, "Didn't you learn martial arts? Seeing her child go missing, as a mother, she doesn't want to live anymore. Don't you have any intention of helping her?" In fact, when the second mother said that her daughter had been taken away, Zhang Xiaohua had already released his divine sense. He had already seen the black-clothed man with a little girl under his armpit. However, there were many people in the square now. The black-clothed man's qinggong didn't seem to be very good. Zhang Xiaohua wasn't in a hurry to chase after him. He only wanted to find an opportunity to relieve himself or play some sort of squeezing before going to rescue the girl. But now that his father had pointed it out in front of him, he was in a bit of a dilemma. Actually, it wasn't really a dilemma. Zhang Xiaohua just wanted to stand out in a low-key manner. But these people in front of him, who didn't know that he was an expert? If not for this, Zhang Kai wouldn't have pointed at him and scolded him. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Father, don't be angry. Your good son will go now. What do you think?" Go where? The cucumbers are already cold. What's the use of you going now?" Zhang Kai looked at this unfilial son and was still fuming. Zhang Xiaohua touched his nose and was a bit speechless. What was wrong with his father? It was said that the greater the power, the greater the responsibility. But this power didn't belong to his father. When did his sense of responsibility become so inflated? Seeing that there weren't many people around, Zhang Xiaohua whispered to Lu Kai, "Brother Kai, pay attention to protect my father. Don't let anything happen to him. I'll be back soon." Lu Kai's face was nervous and said, "Xiaohua, where are you going? Giving such a difficult task to me. I feel burdened in my heart." Zhang Xiaohua rolled his eyes and said, "I'm going to the side alley to relieve myself." Sigh, everyone collapsed. Chapter 384. Zhang Xiaohua slowly walked into the dark alley. Looking around, he really looked like a young man who was secretly urinating. However, when he reached the darkness, he twisted his body as usual and suddenly disappeared. The quiet alley seemed as if no one had ever been there. After Zhang Xiaohua's figure appeared in another place, he didn't waste any time and leaped onto the roof. His feet didn't touch the ground as he chased after a certain place. Yes, it was indeed a roof that didn't touch the ground. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense was indeed useful. However, there was also a drawback. It was like a person standing at a very high place overlooking Lu Town. Everything was in his eyes, but everything was clear and there was no distinction of importance. Just like just now, when Zhang Xiaohua heard Wu Nyang's narration, he released his divine sense to search. However, Lu Town was so big. Although Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense could barely cover it, if the black figure didn't leave hurriedly on the roof, he might not be able to track him down. At this time, after a delay, the black figure had gone far away. It seemed that he had escaped the range of Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. A 7-year-old girl was at the age of flower buds. If something happened to her, her life would be over. Zhang Xiaohua chased after the black figure with all his might. At the same time, he carefully recalled the records of the divine sense in the Carefree Heart Sutra. He wanted to find the technique of using the divine sense in order to overcome the shortcoming of using the divine sense crudely. Half a cup of tea's time passed. Zhang Xiaohua didn't find the answer he was looking for from the Carefree Heart Sutra. This Carefree Heart Sutra was just a basic cultivation method. It only talked about the methods of drawing qi into the body and refining qi. For other magical powers, it only explained the things to pay attention to, but there wasn't the slightest bit of technique to use. Presumably, there wasn't a unified standard for the use of the divine sense. Perhaps each family had their own secret method, so this sutra didn't have any records. While Zhang Xiaohua was pondering, a black shadow jumped out from another place in her divine sense. It was also holding a black object under its armpit and running in another direction. Zhang Xiaohua was startled, but she immediately understood. No wonder she couldn't find him after chasing him all the way. She thought she had made a mistake and didn't see that the black-clothed man's qigong was extremely brilliant. It turned out that this guy actually had some foresight. He first hid for a moment, then changed directions to avoid being tracked. Fortunately, this bastard's patience was not enough. If he had waited for her to chase him out of the city before he came out, she would have suffered unspeakable hardships and lost face in front of her father for nothing. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua was a little angry. She didn't do anything in the air, but she immediately changed direction and floated towards that guy like a ghost. Maybe it was because Zhang Xiaohua was extremely afraid of death, or maybe it was because Zhang Xiaohua was extremely talented in qigong. In short, his levitation technique and escape technique would rapidly improve after a period of time. Under his deliberate use, in the night, his figure actually showed signs of blurring. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was as fast as the wind. Although the black-clothed man was very careful and tried his best to escape, Zhang Xiaohua also didn't have the intention of letting a long line to catch a big fish. So, in the next moment, she had already caught up to that guy's back. Thinking that Zhang Xiaohua was using levitation technique, the tip of her feet basically didn't stop on the roof to borrow strength. Therefore, although that black-clothed man pricked up his ears, he didn't hear any strange movements. It wasn't until the last moment when Zhang Xiaohua approached that the black-clothed man seemed to have a warning in his heart and suddenly wanted to turn around. How could Zhang Xiaohua let him see her face? She stretched out her left hand and grabbed the back of that guy's neck as if she was pinching a chicken. According to Zhang Xiaohua's previous thinking, as long as her left hand exerted a little force, this guy's neck would be broken. But just as Zhang Xiaohua was about to exert more force, she didn't know why she suddenly thought of the little kitten lying under the carriage on the snow with its 4 legs twitching. Zhang Xiaohua sighed in her heart. I don't know where this black-clothed man came from. I also don't know if his hands are stained with blood. AI, forget it, let's just let the authorities scratch their heads. There's no need for me to think about this nonsense. Therefore, when Zhang Xiaohua slightly reduced the force in her hand, the black-clothed man immediately fainted. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent and immediately stretched out her right hand to catch the thing that was about to fall from the black-clothed man's armpit. It was a burlap sack. Zhang Xiaohua looked around and chose an empty platform. Landing, she caught the bright moonlight and opened the burlap sack, revealing a delicate and pretty little girl. Her eyes were tightly closed and her breathing was even. The black-clothed man must have fed her some medicine or sealed her acupoints. Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly. Sealing acupoints was a martial arts technique. He had only been sealed before and had never practiced it. Therefore, he didn't dare to act rashly. If he was fed medicine, he would be helpless. Thinking about it, it was better to leave these things to the experts. He just needed to send the child back safely. Finished thinking, Zhang Xiaohua carried one in each hand and was about to be sensible. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. This black-clothed man did such a repulsive thing in the middle of the night. He must not be a good person. Even if I don't know if he should be killed, I can't let him go so easily. If I hand him over to the authorities, with the corruption of the authorities, they will definitely fine him and let him go. That would really be letting him off easy. Not knowing why, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly thought of the Misty School's disciple who had his dantian destroyed and his martial arts crippled. I don't have internal energy, but don't I have true qi? Even though I haven't trained my lower dantian, I know the location of my lower dantian. Either way, I'll use this bastard to practice. It can be considered as making good use of trash. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and put down the gunny sack. He stretched out his index finger and pointed at the location of the black-clothed man's lower dantian. Just as his finger touched the skin, a stream of true qi entered his body and directly pierced his dantian. The black-clothed man's internal energy that he had painstakingly cultivated immediately dissipated in his body following the destruction of his dantian. Xianxia was not in a hurry to withdraw his true qi. Instead, after the black-clothed man's dantian was destroyed, his true qi circled around his dantian for a while, and then wandered through his meridians for a while before withdrawing it back into his body. Xianxia sat under the moonlight and used his finger to scratch his chin. He thought to himself, the lower dantian is where the internal energy of martial arts is stored. It is like a warehouse. As long as the walls are pushed down, the internal energy inside will run out. Because the warehouse is destroyed, no matter how much one cultivates, they will not be able to accumulate internal energy. Therefore, their martial arts will be crippled. The meridians of the immortal path and martial arts are interlinked. It's just that the true qi is different. One is heaven and earth yuan qi, while the other is self-cultivated internal energy. Sai, the person who created the martial arts, was really a talented person. He could even think of such an unimaginable method. It's a pity that the immortal path is not only about drawing true qi into the body, but also tempering the meridians. Even my own middle dantian has long been tempered to the point where it is like an impenetrable fortress. How could it be so easily broken by someone using true qi? Moreover, because martial arts cannot temper the meridians, the talent of the martial arts practitioner is the most important. This talent is not only about comprehension, but more importantly, the width of the meridians in the body. If the same level of comprehension is used, the wider the meridians and the larger the dantian will definitely have a brighter future. This can't be compared to the cultivation methods of the immortal path, which can continuously temper and widen the meridians. There is unlimited room for improvement. In fact, Xianxia still somewhat underestimated the martial arts. No matter what, the martial arts were also based on the immortal path. How could the creator of the martial arts not understand the principles within? It's just that the cultivation methods of the martial arts were also divided according to the creator. Moreover, because the martial arts had existed for tens of thousands of years, a profound internal strength cultivation method would also have various branches. Each branch would have a unique aspect. Therefore, in Xianxia's era, high-level cultivation methods that could temper the meridians were actually rare. However, it was not like what Xianxia thought, that the cultivation methods of the martial arts simply did not have the effect of tempering the meridians. After understanding the principle of breaking the dantian and abolishing the cultivation of internal strength, Xianxia also laughed. The person who could think of such a vicious method was also a genius. If the dantian was broken by the internal strength, there would be no chance to repair it. It was really killing without spilling blood. It was even more sinister than using a small sword to cut the throat. After thinking about it, Xianxia looked at the sky. It was already late. Presumably, her father and the others were also waiting anxiously. Then, she picked up the sack and used the levitation technique to run to the place where she came from. Not long after, she had already arrived at the corner of the square. At this time, the gongs and drums in the square were still playing. The dragon and lion dance had not stopped. She saw that outside the small alley that Fifth Mother ran out from just now, there was still a group of people standing. Among them, there were two yamen runners who were holding two lanterns in their hands. They had an impatient expression as they listened to Fifth Mother's crying and complaining. Beside Fifth Mother, there was a rather down-and-out middle-aged scholar. He squatted there, hugging his head and sighing from time to time. Sometimes, he even slapped his own mouth and muttered something. As for her father and the others, they were also standing at the side, watching from afar. They were still looking around, as if they were looking for her traces. Seeing this, Xianxia exerted force with her left hand and threw the black-clothed man in front of them. Then, her right hand was not idle. Following the black-clothed man's position, she also gently threw the sack over. The two yamen runners were listening impatiently. Suddenly, their vision turned black. A black object fell in front of their eyes with a "paw" sound. Then, another black object followed and fell right on top of the previous object. When they looked carefully, there was an open sack on top, and a masked black-clothed man was below it. The expressions of the two yamen runners changed greatly. They immediately threw the lanterns to the side, shook their hands and pulled out the padao from their waists. They shouted loudly, "Who? Who?" It was fine if they did not shout. Once they shouted, it was obvious that they were timid. Please collect. Please tip. Thank you. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.